Chapter 776. Chapter 776. One wave after another, the warfare between the true martial school and the emergent school finally ended. The emergent school disciples that managed to escape the siege of the true martial school disciples weren't even 1 in 100. Adding the fact that there were other factions ambushing them, only one transcendent realm expert remains from the group. He brought the few hundred disciples back to the emergence domain in a hurried manner. This matter had thoroughly caused an uproar within the emergence domain. The experts that remained within the emergence domain knew for the first time that their armies had lost. In fact, they had lost very thoroughly. This was something they hadn't thought of before. They had undergone many years of preparations and were prepared to crush the true martial school in one swoop. In all actuality, they did not ever underestimate the true martial school. Everyone knew that the true martial school had governed over the true martial domain before. Even if they're weak now, they still had the foundations of a past governor. Besides, the true martial school was an existence that had been equal with them in terms of position previously. Even if a tiger is dead, their demeanor still remains. Due to this, they had made sufficient preparations even if the disparity in strength in them was large. They had made perfect preparations and gathered numerous troops. However, they still suffered a great loss under the true martial school's hands. The thing that truly hurted their foundations greatly was the death of the Transcendent Realm experts. Only one managed to escape back. Even the school leader died in the true martial domain. Besides, after the expert returned back to the emergence domain, he didn't manage to suppress the wounds on his body and had perished after a while of returning. In other words, their troops were annihilated completely during this conquest. This thoroughly made them go crazy. Afterwards, when more news were released, they finally got wind of the revival of the legendary true martial stone sword that was broken. The true martial school had used it to deeply wound their troops, and every single troops were wounded. This was the reason why only 1 in 100 troops managed to return back alive. When they heard this, they could only smile bitterly and take in a deep breath. They had such backup methods as well. Not only does the true martial school possess such methods, if they utilized the true martial stone sword right from the start, there wouldn't be much problem. After all, they had the emergence immortal exterminating sword to fend off against the true martial stone sword. However, the thing that made it truly terrifying was that the true martial stone sword had absorbed the blood essence of the perished experts for the past 10 years. With the 7 transcendent realm experts together, the true martial stone sword had thoroughly won over the emergence immortal exterminating sword, in which its full strength was unable to be utilized. It struck them when they weren't expecting it, which caused their troops to almost experience total annihilation. Not long after the batch of people escaped back to the emergence domain started retracting their influences over other areas. They immediately announced the seclusion of the emergence domain for 10,000 years. Within 10,000 years, they would never appear within the public. After this news was released, it caused the entire starry skies to tremble. Originally, they only knew that the two factions had both suffered great losses within this war, with the emergent school suffering much more greatly compared to the true martial school. Nobody could weigh how much of a loss this was towards the emergent school, especially after the troops of the emergent school had been annihilated by the true martial stone sword. However, with the announcement of seclusion coming from the emergent school, some people immediately caught on to something. This time, the emergent school must have really suffered a great loss. If it wasn't for this, they wouldn't have to announce the seclusion for 1,000 years with how strong they were. 10,000 years was enough to nurture 2 transcendent realm experts. It was apparent how great of a loss they must have suffered. Contrary to the emergence domain that made the announcement in a low-key manner, the true martial school's disciples were going around without masking their presence at all. They were continuously assaulting the South barbarians and the demon-worshipping religion that were exceptionally active for the past 10 years, as well as the forces of some other factions that tried to extend their influence within the true martial domain. Originally, the South region was the true martial school's land, which forbade outsiders from entering. It was viewed as their very last land, and they didn't allow outsiders to have any influence over it. As a result, the South region was only governed by the true martial school, which they had absolute authority over. However, for the past 10 years, the situation had changed completely. Every huge faction took advantage of the fact that the true martial school weren't free to deal with them, which allowed them to extend their influence within. After the true martial school had defeated the emergent school, they immediately started dealing with these intruders. They presented a very resolute attitude. No matter who it was or which faction it was, those that dared to affect the benefits of the true martial school would be targeted by the entire true martial school. In fact, the battles between transcendent realm experts occurred because of this. It should be known that transcendent realm experts were a core factor in intimidating the opponent with their strength. Under normal circumstances, they would never take action. Usually, it would be sufficient for a great sage to be involved within such matters. If a transcendent realm expert was forced to take action, it meant that their factions were raging, and the transcendent realm experts represented their rage. With such a domineering attitude being displayed by the true martial school, along with the momentum of their great victory against the emergent school, most other factions had retreated. No benefits would be granted upon them for fighting against the fanatical true martial school. They wouldn't do so, especially when the true martial school was displaying such exceptional strength. They had more than 20 transcendent realm experts taking care of the situation. It was twice the amount compared to the Xian Yuan Temple. The true martial school had yet to turn into a weakened cat, and were still ferocious tigers. This made all other factions afraid of them. With another 3 years, the true martial school managed to chase these factions out of the South region. However, the South region was already in shambles. The death of those normal citizens might be nothing. While tens of billions of citizens might have died within this havoc, it wasn't much of a problem. After all, the reproduction speed of those normal citizens were exceptionally quick. Within just a few hundred years, the lost amount of citizens would be replenished. For the true martial school that had been existing for tens of thousands of years, a few hundred years meant nothing. However, the thing that made the true martial school suffer a loss were the deaths of the martial warriors. The martial warriors with lower realm of cultivation like those in the legendary realm or the true way realm might be nothing. With just a few hundred years, the amount can be replenished. However, the one that made them suffer a huge loss were the experts above the sage realm. They were the main force within this warfare. With the death of a large batch of great sages and sage realm experts, it lowered the domineering effect of the true martial school by a significant amount. However, the greatest loss was the 7 transcendent realm experts that had perished. Among them included the chief of the Dangyang Peak. He was still in his prime and could protect the school for a few thousand more years. While they had managed to make themselves domineering, their loss was much greater with these messes. For so many years, the true martial school had always been thinking of taking over the true martial domain again. With such havoc, their dreams were shattered. The huge forces within the true martial domain, who were already hostile towards the true martial school, had also become more vigilant towards them. Of course, if they were to compare losses, the emergent school had suffered a much greater loss. The emergent school had hurt their foundations and had to seclude their domain from the world for 10,000 years. Naturally, the true martial school didn't require such a long time. However, after clearing out the other forces, they did not hunt them down outside of the South region. After that, they announced that they would seclude themselves from the world in order to recover from the war. The true martial school wasn't able to suffer such a turmoil in its current state. However, the true martial domain did not thoroughly calm down even when the true martial school had secluded themselves. On the contrary, the battle between the true martial school and the emergent school was just the start of a havoc. During the second year of the true martial school seclusion, another shocking thing happened. The meteor sect suddenly attacked the Xian Yuan Temple without any warnings with an overbearing force. The battle lasted for a mere 2 years, and it ended with the Xian Yuan Temple's annihilation. As if they had acquired the lesson from the emergent school, losing to the true martial school, they didn't give the Xian Yuan Temple any time to prepare or to rest. They just attacked out of the blue and directly invaded the Xian Yuan Temple. The battle happened all of a sudden and ended very suddenly as well. With only 2 years, it ended with the Xian Yuan Temple suffering a loss. An uproar occurred throughout the true martial world. If they didn't feel any huge threat coming from the defeat of the emergent school, they suddenly became much more vigilant with the defeat of the Xian Yuan Temple. Every single faction was afraid of it happening to them. Originally, they were shocked by the strength displayed by the emergent school. However, seeing as to how the emergent school had suffered a loss under the hands of the true martial school, they only felt that these extraterrestrial overlords weren't as scary as they thought. After all, even the true martial school had defeated them. Their strengths were similar to the true martial school. In fact, if they decided to team up, they would definitely crush the true martial school. It was precisely because of such thoughts that they didn't place much attention to this matter. Besides, within their hearts, they figured that things would end following the defeat of the emergent school. They thought that the peace of the past few tens of thousands of years would return. The extraterrestrial forces that wanted to meddle with the true martial world's affairs had also forgotten about everything. However, the meteor sect had destroyed the resistance of the Xian Yuan Temple with a sudden assault. The Xian Yuan Temple had been fighting against the true martial school for many years. However, with just 2 years, they had thoroughly crumbled. This made the factions within the true martial domain remain silent. Originally, they had underestimated the extraterrestrial overlord. Thinking back, their thoughts were extremely laughable. Even if the true martial school was able to do something, it didn't imply that they could do it as well. The reason why the true martial school was able to heavily wound the emergent school wasn't because the emergent school was too weak. On the contrary, the true martial school was too strong. They had governed the true martial domain for many years and had many foundations left behind. If they were to truly take action, it would contain an unimaginable force. As for the Xian Yuan Temple, they had been in their flourished state for the past few years. They had been fighting against the true martial school many times, and they were naturally not weak. Within the past 2 years, they had been using all kinds of methods. However, the disparity in strength with the true martial school was too huge. They had been completely wiped out by the meteor sect. Comparing these two together, it was apparent how strong the true martial school was. After all, they were once overlord that governed over the world. Others wouldn't be able to imitate such foundations. Thinking back about it, the strength which the Xian Yuan Temple had possessed when facing the true martial school seemed much more like a joke. They were treated like clowns. Chapter 777. Chapter 777. 30 years, unstable situation. Not only Xian Yuan Temple, but even other forces had this hunch. After 2 invasions from the overlords outside the domain, everyone was well reminded that the hidden strength beneath true martial school was so scary. It could even defeat a force in the size of 3 Xian Yuan Temple. Emergent School's superior strength beyond everyone's imagination was why true martial school had a substantial loss. Emergent School had made preparations for more than 10 years, or even longer, to invade true martial school. They wanted to have the upper hand during the actual clash in true martial domain. No one expected that the emergent school would face stiff resistance from true martial school. They were defeated in one fell swoop, suffering a hefty loss. As a result, the emergent school was forced to hide in their domain for 10,000 years. On the other hand, another behemoth that sat on the same level as true martial school, Xian Yuan Temple, failed to protect themselves even for 2 years. Under Meteor Sect's attack, it collapsed utterly with countless masters slaughtered. Until now, Meteor Sect was still hunting down the remaining Xian Yuan Temple masters. This created a huge contrast, like a scorching slap in the face on the faces of those arrogant and domineering big shots in true martial domain. In the past, true martial domain was reserving their strength. Having accumulated enough strength, they would continue to dominate the true martial domain sooner or later. This made their vigilance towards true martial school suddenly rose to the extreme. However, although they were wary of true martial school, they couldn't help it. True martial school had announced its seclusion and retreated any big-scale operation to the outside world. Of course, some members of true martial school would still leave the school occasionally. Right now, true martial school was severely injured. It was within the expectation that true martial school would not interfere with the true martial domain on a large scale for a long time. This should have been a good thing, but the other big shots in true martial domain had a horrific discovery. Without a shield like true martial school, the overlords in the star region's depths would covet them blatantly. In the past, even if true martial school was in decline, it was still the leading behemoth of true martial domain and the representative of true martial domain. Many times when people mention true martial domain, they only seem to know true martial school. That was still in other worlds far away, in countless miles. It was conceivable how well-known true martial domain was. True martial domain was considerably a different caliber with the others. So after the overlords turned their attention to the true martial domain, true martial school was also the first target. This was also the key to why emergent school would clash with true martial school at the very start. True martial school was representative. Conquering true martial school was similar to conquering half of the true martial domain. Unbeknownst to the other big shots in true martial domain, true martial school had become a tree that protected them from the wind and rain. However, when true martial school announced their seclusion in the mountain, the other big shots of true martial domain lost their protection. Only then, they realized that the days in the past were in great leisure. True martial school had helped them withstand many storms and eliminated many worries. The other big shots of true martial domain had to face the terrifying overlord outside the domain. True martial school had suffered heavy losses in the previous clash with emergent school. Although true martial school went into seclusion in the mountain, its momentum was flourishing. There would be no overlords outside the domain who wanted to end up like emergent school to taste true martial stone sword's power. Since they dared not covet true martial school, their target naturally turned to other big shots in the true martial domain. Xianyuan Temple was just the beginning. Not long after the collapse of Xianyuan Temple, when the entire true martial domain was still in the storm, another overlord from outside the domain rushed into the true martial domain. It was the Bliss Ice Palace. Their target was the Northern Barbarians. Compared to Xianyuan Temple, Northern Barbarians' resistance was even more unbearable. Although it ruled over the northern wilderness for countless years, it was worse than Xianyuan Temple in terms of the foundation. After more than a year of resistance, the entire northern barbarian imperial city was destroyed. The great force ruled the northern wilderness for many years, who had armor horsemen in their disposal, was completely crushed. In the entire true martial domain, many big shots suddenly lost their voices. From the time outsiders attacked Xianyuan Temple, these big shots realized the impending dangers. These outsiders didn't seem interested in the true martial school, but the entire true martial domain. After the collapse of two big shots in succession, true martial domain was full of panic. Many forces had started efforts to collaborate into alliances spontaneously. They wanted to know why the major forces outside the domain chose to tackle them one by one. They even sent representatives to visit true martial school, requesting true martial school to stand up, speak for them, and negotiate with the overlords outside the domain. True martial school naturally had no resources to take care of them. Emergent school's affairs inflicted severe injury to the school. The school was still licking its wounds. Most importantly, true martial school desired all these arrogant and domineering big shots to be wiped out. In the 10 years of fighting the emergent school's invasion, these powerful forces had also contributed to the flames in true martial school. They gloated and even secretly infiltrated the South region. It was too late to ask for help from true martial school. Even if true martial school was still in the peak period, the school couldn't help out these rebellious forces. The school still recognized the win and lost in it. These big shots did not see eye to eye with each other. Without the lead of true martial school, their plans to ally were all of a sudden shelved. Time went by in chaos. Another 30 years had passed. The seclusion of true martial school took 30 years too. 30 years was enough for ordinary people to grow up. The South region quickly resumed its lively scene, as if the decade ago's turmoil was non-existent. In every turmoil, ordinary mortals would sustain huge blows. The good news was they would recover swiftly every time. Surprisingly, It was countless times faster than warriors. Somehow there was no outsider intervention in the South region, enabling a swift recovery. Many true martial school's disciples follow a tight patrol to eliminate any instability. True martial school announced its seclusion. They might not appear in great numbers outside the South region, but it did not mean that the school would ignore the South region. This indicated the South region's value in true martial school's shoes. True martial school would wipe out anyone who dared to infiltrate in haste. But compared to the peaceful South region, other places were not so lucky. After the overlord outside the domain uprooted Xian Yuan Temple and northern barbarian imperials, more than a dozen powerful forces that were initially influential in the true martial domain were uprooted entirely. Even the alliance formed later on was utterly crushed in the face of the overlords outside the domain. The overlords outside the domain were way over the alliance caliber. After all, the overlords were capable of dominating the entire world. Except for the unlucky emergent school that suffered terribly at true martial school, the other forces outside the domain were at the same caliber. The initially famous forces had acted all cowardice. The difference in strength was too obvious. The more so, the more shocking true martial school was able to defeat emergent school. But compared to the turmoil and panic in other places, the true martial school area had always been calm. No one wanted to stroke the tiger's whiskers at this time. Under such circumstances, a message came from true martial school. True martial school decided to stop the seclusion to prepare for the new Supreme School Master's enthronement ceremony. The power transfer of true martial school would soon begin. At the same time, it was another once-in-a-100-year disciple recruitment drive for true martial school. This was also true martial school's old tradition. The ancient roads that remained silent for more than 100 years had also become lively. The disciple recruitment was supposed to start a few years earlier. However, it was delayed because of the recovery needed. Now, with the initial restoration of prosperity in the mortal world, it was time to open the sect's door to recruit disciples. True martial school disciples suffered heavy casualties. Now it was the time to introduce new blood. Compared with the fact that true martial school opened the door to recruiting disciples, many people paid more attention to the new Supreme Schoolmaster taking over. In the true martial domain, there were very few people who could compare with the true martial school Supreme Schoolmaster. In other words, Supreme Schoolmaster was considered one of the many giants in true martial school. Every replacement of the Supreme Schoolmaster of true martial school would be a major event in the true martial domain. Every ceremony was bound to be bustled with spectators. Right now, not only the big shots in the true martial domain were attending, many overlords outside the domain would send a distinguished representative to watch the ceremony. It symbolized that true martial school had regained some recognition from many overlords after countless years of decline. Although true martial school was completely incomparable with the peak period, it would not be regarded as a small indigenous power in a certain world with its strong foundation. 30 years was enough for true martial school to undergo tremendous changes. The older generation, who originally held the power of the school, began to gradually delegate power to the next generation of disciples. The new generation that emerged during the 10-Year War had displayed a strong side too. Huang Wuji's succession as the new Supreme Schoolmaster was just the beginning of this matter. In this jubilation, silence still enshrouded the Tibetan Star Summit. After all, there were too little people compared to other lineage. White clouds strolled the clear, blue sky. It was a serene scene. Boom! An unmatched force swept out from the Tibetan Star Summit, condensing into a chi column that rushed toward the sky. A cyan figure jumped out from the mountain. He gazed at the sky while letting out a long roar, shaking the sky and the earth. Many disciples passing by stopped and watched. Chapter 778. Chapter 778. The changes in 30 years? Who's this? Why is he so arrogant? Ask someone. You don't even know who he is? He's Yi Shiwen of the Tibetan Star Summit. See, so he's the Yi Shiwen. He's truly a terrifying person. Although we're quite some distance apart, I can still feel a strong oppression coming from him. I almost couldn't catch my breath. I know, right? He's truly extremely terrifying. According to rumors, he had already killed a few half-step transcendent realm experts many years ago. Now that he had cultivated in close cultivation for 30 years, who knows how strong he is now? It's impossible, right? No matter what, it's just 30 years. Even if the school were to nurture him with utmost priority, he shouldn't have such a terrifying advancement, right? Said that person filled with doubt. You'll get it if you look at the amount of time he cultivated. Until now, it's only been more than 100 years. What were we doing when we were 100 years old? We were merely standing out more than average. Even so, we were already regarded as prodigies. As for half-step transcendent realm experts, they are legendary figures that we've never met before. According to rumors, he is going to be the next in line Tibetan star son. He would definitely be a huge figure within our school. In fact, the new schoolmaster, Huang Wuji, is his senior brother. What's wrong with him being a little arrogant? Indeed, I saw his attacks 30 years ago during the war. However, he isn't this terrifying during that time. His strength has increased tremendously throughout the past 30 years. Why do I feel like he's only a great sage? He doesn't seem like a half-step transcendent realm. Are the rumors mistaken? How is that possible? We don't even have the qualifications to raise our heads to look at such an expert. It's normal for you to be unable to see through his cultivation. If even you could tell, that would be the impossible matter. Everyone's discussions were heard by Yi Shiwen. However, he chose to ignore them. It had been 30 years. Within the past 30 years, he had finally entered the great sage, great perfection. For him, this was an extremely important realm. This was the end of the great sage realm and the start of the transcendent realm. It was the realm that would open up a completely new world to him. In this realm, the sturdier the foundations, the higher his future accomplishments would be. In fact, entering the transcendent realm would be much easier later on. He knew that even the tallest buildings would require a sturdy foundation. Compared to 30 years ago, his strength experienced a tremendous growth. Based on his progress, it was naturally incomparable to the 10 years of warfare he had gone through. During that particular 10 years, he was always fighting with his life on the line. He used all sorts of methods he had in order to survive and kill more enemies. However, his accomplishments within the past 30 years didn't pale in comparison to those 10 years either. He wasn't able to digest all the insights he had acquired throughout the 10 years of warfare. During the past 30 years, he had been patching up all the flaws in his cultivation one by one. He only broke through after he completely patched up everything. Naturally, it was to prevent leaving a flaw within and ensuring the stability of his cultivation's foundations. He had experienced the benefits of building a sturdy foundation. It allowed him to challenge someone above his cultivation realm. In the past 30 years, he and the Star Beast Avatar had been in close cultivation. They continuously studied the spirit remains of the emergent school leader and studied all the information regarding the cultivation realm. He used the mysterious space to study every usable information contained within. After continuous close cultivation, he was only one step away from entering the transcendent realm. Only a tiny bit of progress was needed for his ascension. With the extremely strong innate powers and the innate bloodline of the Star Beast Avatar, his combat prowess when fighting a transcendent realm expert would increase tremendously. His original body wouldn't have such an advantage. Of course, if his original body broke through via the cultivation of the tyrant body, he would naturally put effort in nurturing it. Besides, the Tianyuan mirror had also reached its final phase of transformation. Very soon, it would complete its breakthrough and become a transcendent tool. With it, it would become one of Yi Zaiwen's major assistants. Through the discussions of these people, only did Yi Shiwen know that his senior brother was going to inherit the position of the Supreme Schoolmaster. If it wasn't for him coming out of close cultivation in time, he might have missed the ceremony. He had never received any news about it. It was apparent that everyone in the Tibetan Star Summit was afraid of interrupting him, which stopped them from delivering the news to him. Hearing this news, he felt both happy and worried. Naturally, he was happy because his senior brother was about to inherit the Supreme Schoolmaster position. It meant that he had entered the transcendent realm. His talents were extremely high to begin with, and he even possessed extremely sturdy foundations for his cultivation after cultivating for thousands of years. In fact, it was much sturdier than Yi Zaiwen's. In the past 30 years, it was unknown how many resources the school had invested into him. They did whatever they could to increase his cultivation. At the same time, the more they acted like this, the more it proves that the schoolmaster was having difficulties in surviving. If it wasn't because of this, they wouldn't need to pass the schoolmaster position away so hurriedly to Huang Wuji. He had been in close cultivation the entire time. He could only guess what condition the schoolmaster was in. Not only does the schoolmaster's condition relate to him, it was even related to the thoughts of the entire true martial school. Unless he could enter the transcendent realm and become one of the powerhouse in the school, it would be hard for him to gain any support. In fact, if it wasn't for him entering the half-step transcendent realm, and was someone treated with utmost importance and nurturing, he might not even know the matters about the supreme schoolmaster's body condition. Of course, this matter would have to be kept as a secret. Absolutely no one should get wind of it, no matter if they were the disciples of the school or an external enemy. If the news was spread around, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. As such, they had to ensure Huang Wuji's growth as fast as possible. If Huang Wuji managed to enter the transcendent realm, nothing would happen even if the news was released. Finally, you came out of close cultivation, Yi Shiwen. The voice of a wolf cub that appeared out of nowhere resounded. It pulled Yi Shiwen away from his thoughts. As he looked at the wolf cub transformed into a ray of black light and rushed in front of him. Beside the wolf cub was a beautiful woman. Naturally, it was Xiaoya. Compared to 30 years ago, the wolf cub's appearance didn't change much. It still had the appearance of a dog, and on his face was still a despicable smile. The only thing that changed was his strength. It had ascended to the half-step transcendent realm. Its progression speed was much faster than Yi Zaiwen's original body. With its bloodline and innate talent, it would be able to kill a half-step intermediate transcendent realm expert. It doesn't pale in comparison when compared to Yi Shiwen. A sudden sense of emotion surged within Yi Shiwen. Some creatures' innate talents were extremely high. For example, the wolf club and his star beast avatar. His original body, the physique of a normal human being, wasn't comparable to it at all. However, after seeing Xiaoya, only did he realize that there were heaven-defying humans as well. After 30 years, Xiaoya had also grown a little. Her appearance wasn't that of an 8 to 9 years old little girl anymore. Instead, she now looked like a 13 to 14 years old teenage girl. Her sky blue dress was laced with silver threads, and the teenage girl's face looked extremely delicate and pretty. Her skin was snowy white, her brows were curvy, and her mouth was tiny. As she smiled, flowers seemed to bloom. Her appearance resembled a teenage girl in her 14s, and her silver long hair was tied into 2 coiled knots. 2 silvery threads were hanging beneath her eyes and were swaying lightly. Although she looked a little different than she was 30 years ago, Yi Shiwen immediately recognized her. She had truly reached the intermediate stage. This speed and advancement made all his pride disappear. Within the past 30 years, Xiaoya did not let time pass in vain. Her speed had far surpassed Yi Zaiwen's advancement in cultivation. Even when he had gone from a great mastery, great sage, to a great sage, great perfection realm. See, little girl, I told you that big brother Yi would definitely come out of close cultivation today. With a mere calculation through my fingers, I can know everything that happened for the past 500 years, and everything that will happen during the next 500 years, said the wolf club with a prideful tone to Xiaoya. It raised its head and puffed its chest out, as if he was a fake fortune teller. Then, it looked at Xiaoya with an expression that said, "How's that? Aren't you in awe of my greatness? Quickly praise me." Although it didn't say that, Yi Shiwen was already extremely familiar with it. Just by looking at its expression, he could tell what it wanted to say. He immediately became speechless and slapped it with his palm. However, the wolf club seemed to have expected it. It immediately jumped away and shouted in a weird tone, "Gosh, why do you want to hit someone the moment you come out of close cultivation? This is truly unscientific. Luckily, my strength is peerless. Otherwise, I would have been ambushed by you. Ever since Yi Shiwen had mentioned the sentence, this is truly unscientific. It had become the Wold Club's catchphrase. It almost had to bring it up every single time. Although it was just a gag, Yi Shiwen felt as if he had gone back to the earth. He was already very speechless to this despicable wolf, especially after seeing its despicable smile. Xiaoyu was at the side, quietly staring at the two of them arguing. A smile appeared on her face, and flowers seemed to have bloomed on her face as well. However, she quickly reverted back to her calm appearance. She possessed a natural aura that pushed everyone far away from her. Yi Shiwen sighed in his heart. As expected, after handing Xiaoya over to the fair Maiden Peak chef, she is influenced by that ice-cold woman. Last time, Xiaoya wasn't like this. Although she didn't seem any different, it actually possessed a huge difference. Although Xiaoya was also quiet last time, it merely felt like she was a quiet girl and an introvert. However, right now, she seemed like she didn't care for mundane matters anymore, and her expression was extremely cold. It gave Yi Shiwen a mild headache. If Xiaoya really became an ice-cold woman, Yi Shiwen might go crazy. Luckily, she was just mildly influenced by the fair Maiden Peak chef. Yi Shiwen walked to the side of Xiaoya and pressed his hand on her small head. He rubbed her head forcefully and made a mess out of her hair. "What are you doing?" said Xiaoya angrily. Her big pair of beautiful eyes glared at Yi Shiwen. She was angry at Yi Shiwen for messing with her hair. "Haha, you should be like this. You're just a little girl. How old are you? And yet, your expression is so stiff. That ain't good. You should act like this." Yan Zhaoga didn't care about her anger and laughed loudly. Although Xiaoya had grown a little, she was still the little girl that would never grow up in Yi Ziwen's eyes. Chapter 779. Chapter 779. Another year of recruitment. Humans were conservative people. In the eyes of parents, their child would never grow up. No matter how many years had passed, this point of view would be extremely hard to change. Just like Xiaoya, no matter how much she changed, she would still be that little girl in Yi Ziwen's heart. Xiaoya looked at Yi Shiwen speechlessly. Naturally, she knew that he was discriminating against her master. Although Yi Shiwen was extremely respectful towards the fair Maiden Peak chef, he was extremely troubled with her ice-cold attitude. She was originally ice-cold to begin with. It wasn't much of a problem. However, the main issue was that she might educate Xiaoya into acting like her. This was the part that Yi Shiwen couldn't accept the most. One side was her own big brother, while the other side was her master. It wasn't appropriate to be biased to neither side. A troubled expression appeared on her delicate face, which made Yi Shiwen burst out with laughter. "Come, let's go to Xian City," said Yi Shiwen with a wave of his hand. Naturally, he was going to the Xian City now to welcome his brother, sister-in-law, his second eldest sister, and his second eldest sister's husband. Previously, they didn't have the qualifications to enter here after the mountain doors opened. Now it was different. They had already entered the half-step legendary realm. They naturally had the qualifications to enter the true martial school now. Similar to Yi Shiwen, they chose to enter using the ancient road. Originally, they could just be brought in by Yi Shiwen. With his current identity, no one would dare go against it. However, they rejected the offer. Yi Shiwen didn't mind it either. Although battle would be inevitable within the ancient road, it had its own benefits. In the past, he had gained many benefits from the ancient road, and thus didn't have a reason to stop them. Through a rough calculation of time, they should be reaching the Xian City soon. Yi Shiwen decided to wait there first and cultivate by the meantime. After all, cultivating anywhere was the same to him. There were no differences. "That's boring. I don't want to go." "Go by yourself." After knowing Yi Ziwen's intention, the Wolf Club pouted to show that he wasn't interested. For someone so hyperactive like him, he would rather be killed than to wait for someone in the Xian City quietly. "Then suit yourself." "Xiaoya, how about you?" asked Yi Shiwen. "He'll go." Xiaoya nodded. The Wolf Club transformed into a stream of black light and disappeared somewhere to play around. Fortunately, everyone in the true martial school treated the Wolf Club as Yi Ziwen's spiritual pet and were somewhat respectful towards it. Besides, there weren't many capable of taking him down considering how strong he was. Even if they wanted to deal with him, they could only glare at him without doing anything else. Yi Shiwen and Xiaoya transformed into a stream of light and reached the Xin city very quickly. It was located by the most external location of the area. As such, it was invaded once during the 10 Years of War. Scars, blood marks, and burnt marks were left all over the city walls. Although the formation inside the city was already repaired, they didn't touch anything outside of it. It served as a reminder to others about what kind of war the school had experienced and how they managed to survive through the hard times. Its main purpose was to motivate the younger generations. Most of the time, the Xin city was much more quiet. Other than the few disciples that were on duty, nobody could be seen. However, the amount of people present in the city would reach its peak whenever it was time to recruit disciples. Many senior disciples would come here out of curiosity. Even if only 1 out of 100 disciples were curious, it was an extremely large number, considering how large of a quantity of disciples the true martial school had. Naturally, there would be talented prodigies in every recruitment session. The ones where the senior disciples cared about the most were these people, who would be regarded as a distinguished character. These distinguished characters' strength usually surpasses a normal person, and would become an elite within the true martial school. In fact, they might chase up to the senior disciples in a short amount of time. Of course, other than these people that were merely spectating, there were many legatees who were observing the new recruits. If they saw someone that absolutely had talents, they would naturally attempt to interact with them. The rules of the school was to wait for everyone to be present and allow the new disciples to decide on their own. However, the school didn't forbid the legatees from interacting with the new disciples early on. As such, most of the talented, distinguished figures were reserved by the 10 great legatees. Even if someone were to enter the top 100 legatees, no one would exceed it. Other than these distinguished figures, the second-rate disciples were also desirable by many legatees. In the past, when Yi Shiwen had just entered the true martial school, he was considered one of the second-rate disciples. Although the competition for him wasn't as big as those distinguished figures, he was still a target to be competed for. He wouldn't have to worry about not belonging in any legatee. However, he had offended the law enforcement hall by the city gates. With how terrifying the law enforcement hall was, those that offended them and those that they ordered to be dealt with wouldn't be accepted by most of the legatees. After all, they weren't willing to offend the law enforcement hall because of one second-rate disciple. As a result, he ended up being deserted by the legatees. If there wasn't such a weird legatee like the Tibetan Star Summit, he might have to quietly draw out from the true martial school. Thinking back about it, his impression in other people's hearts would be idiotic and daring. A new disciple that had no foundations or backgrounds dared to go against the law enforcement hall. With his current understanding of the law enforcement hall's true strength, he would definitely be crushed to pieces if the law enforcement hall was serious in dealing with him. For every legatees that desired to make their lineage flourish, the recruitment period would be the most important period of time. In fact, it was directly related to its outcome during the 100 years in the future. For the previous Tibetan Star Summit, most of their time and efforts were used on finding the complete version of the Tibetan Star Sutra. After all, it was the foundations of the Tibetan Star Summit. If even the Tibetan Star Sutra wasn't complete, they wouldn't be able to return back to their prime. As such, they weren't interested in the new disciples during every recruitment. If one voluntarily entered, they would be accepted. After all, they had only been passing down the legacies to one person for a few generations. Other than someone like the senior brother that was being nurtured wholeheartedly to become the next Tibetan Star Son, other disciples were left to rot on their own. In the past, there were people that entered the Tibetan Star Summit, only to quit it soon after entering. After all, they couldn't bear the attitude of the Tibetan Star Summit that left their disciples to rot and let them do whatever they wanted to. As such, Yi Shiwen called the Tibetan Star Summit a weird lineage. The few of them that remained were also pretty weird, as they were able to bear with the school, allowing them to do whatever they wanted to. For others, they wouldn't accept such a teaching method. However, for those that remained in the Tibetan Star Summit, this was a great method of teaching for them. After all, no one was constricting them, and they had all obtained a decent accomplishment. However, those were in the past. Previously, Yi Shiwen had already patched up the whole Tibetan Star Sutra. Without needing to worry about it anymore, the Tibetan Star Summit naturally started moving towards its prime. This was the last wish of the last few generations Tibetan Star Sun. Now was the best time for them to do so. After all, the senior brother, Huang Wuji, was appointed as the next Supreme Schoolmaster. Although he had to take care of the grand scheme of things, as long as he was acting a little biased towards the Tibetan Star Summit, it would be extremely beneficial for them. There were also the two great sages, Lu Yanlan and Bai Jiansong, as well as Yi Shiwen, a monstrous half-step transcendent realm expert. Yang Weijin and Deng Shuixin were already in the Sage Great Mastery realm, and was about to enter the Sage Great Perfection realm. Sooner or later, they would enter the Great Sage realm. Compared to the pitiful Tibetan Star Summit lineage in the past, the current one would be considered having many talented people within. Yi Shiwen reached the Ying Xian city. Other than welcoming his brother and sister into the Tibetan Star Summit, he was responsible for the task of interacting with the talented disciples and recruiting them into the Tibetan Star Summit as soon as possible. If it was in the past, the Tibetan Star Summit wouldn't have any specialties. However, no one would dare to belittle the combat power of the Tibetan Star Summit now. After all, it was the next-in-line school master's lineage. How could it be bad? Besides, there were Yi Shiwen, Lu Yanlan, Bai Jiansong, and the others that had performed exceptionally well during the 10 years' warfare, which made themselves famous. The new disciples obtained within this recruitment period would be considered their junior brothers. However, after 2 more periods of recruitment years, when the authority of the true martial school was all rightfully distributed, those that enter would regard them as the master uncle. Yi Shiwen and Xiaoya quietly waited by an inn. No one spoke, and they were only waiting. This was considered quite normal between them. Yi Shiwen retrieved his own aura. With his cultivation, it was easy to not attract any attention. As long as he wasn't willing to, no disciples here would be able to notice him. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen realized that a silhouette appeared by the table beside him. It appeared without him noticing at all. Suddenly his heart palpitated. After turning his head around, he realized that it was the old city lord of the Ying Xian city. With his current cultivation, no one beneath the transcendent realm would be able to mask their cultivation. There was only one possibility. This old city lord was a transcendent realm expert. In the past, he assumed that he was just an average great sage. Thinking back, his knowledge was quite shallow back then. Yi Shiwen didn't dare to act high and lofty. He immediately stood up and cupped his hands. "Greetings, senior." Yi Shiwen had always respected the old city lord. When he first arrived, he was oblivious of various matters and had killed someone of the law enforcement hall. If it wasn't for the old city lord protecting him, he might have been killed by the people of the law enforcement hall. He wouldn't even have the chance to join the Tibetan Star Summit. Otherwise, with how forceful the law enforcement hall was, they wouldn't simply restrict Yi Shiwen from entering any legatees if they weren't afraid of the old city lord who was a transcendent realm expert. Xiaoya beside him also quickly greeted him. She wasn't the ignorant little girl beside Yi Shiwen who didn't know anything anymore, especially with her master being much more responsible than the Tibetan Star Sun. Naturally, her master would point out every huge figure within the true martial school. She was much more clearer on whoever was a transcendent realm expert compared to Yi Shiwen. A warm smile appeared on the old city lord's face. "You're the most talented person I've ever seen through so many years. Someone that's able to reach your current cultivation is close to none. In the future, the school would have to rely on you." Chapter 780. Chapter 780. Recruiting distinguished talents. Even he never expected Yi Shiwen to reach such a level when he merely helped Yi Shiwen with one sentence in the past. This might just be fate. You don't pale in comparison either. Based on talents alone, yours far surpasses his. The only problem is that your experience is not as great as his, said the old city lord to Xiaoya. Those that had entered the great sage realm had mostly experienced thousands of years of cultivation, participated in more than hundreds of battles, and experienced many mortals' affairs. Someone like Xiaoya that could easily enter the great sage realm was close to none. Yi Shiwen smiled brilliantly. If it was talent alone, any random person within the true martial school would have an extremely high chance of being more talented than him. Besides, Xiaoya was an outstanding prodigy that shook the higher-ups of the school. Would the Tibetan Star Summit make any huge move this year? Asked the old city lord as he looked at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen nodded and said, "Our Tibetan Star Summit hopes to recruit some talented disciples in this year's recruitment in hopes to allow the Tibetan Star Summit to return back to its prime." Returning the Tibetan Star Summit back to its prime was definitely not something achievable in a short amount of time. Their current recruitment was merely to lay the foundations for it. This year's disciples are quite decent. There would be more talented people compared to the last recruitment. The amount of distinguished talents would also far surpass the previous ones. It's a great opportunity for your Tibetan Star Summit, said the old city lord with a smile. Many ancient roads going towards the west region, the central region, the east region, and the north region are activated. Some people had also walked into these ancient roads. It's been many years since an outer region prodigy has arrived. Yi Shiwen was surprised for a moment. He wasn't aware of these matters. However, after giving it a thought, he understood what the old city lord meant. It wasn't anything weird. After all, when the true martial school was governing over the true martial domain, the south region was where they set their central as. However, prodigies didn't only sprout from the south region. There were many prodigies that originated from other regions, and even the four wilderness. A few years ago, the ancient roads were already paved one after another. However, as the true martial school lost its control towards the regions outside of the south region, these ancient roads slowly became quiet again. Other regions' prodigies were recruited by their local forces. After so many years, the situation had never changed. However, it was different now. As the overlords outside the domain continued to annihilate the remaining big shots, these prodigies lost their place of belonging. As for the overlords, their vigilance towards the locals of the true martial domain were extremely high. They already had their own world backing them up. They didn't have to care for the prodigies in these lands, and had made no plans of recruiting them at all. As such, if these local prodigies wanted to continue to cultivate, they would have to enter other forces. After the overlord's invasion, only the true martial school managed to fend off the attacks of these overlords. Evidently, true martial school managed to defeat the emergent school's huge army. This was what many others yearned for. If they joined other big shots, they might be defeated by the extraterrestrial overlords. When the time comes, they would have to face the situation of being hunted down by others. However, it would be different if they joined the true martial school. After all, their safety inside here was guaranteed. The situation would be completely different. Our Tibetan Star Summit only hopes to recruit 1 or 2 distinguished talents, said Yi Shiwen with a smile. The numbers of distinguished talents were limited every time, and they would be distributed evenly. The Tibetan Star Summit would naturally be unable to pick all of them. It wouldn't be a waste if they managed to snatch at least one of them. "Haha, that should be possible," said the old city lord as he laughed loudly. For him, it didn't matter which lineage acquired them. After all, they were the disciples of the true martial school. As he laughed, the old city lord's silhouette slowly disappeared. Just like how he was when he arrived, Yi Shiwen couldn't see his traces at all. They're coming. A new wave of disciples are coming." A shout suddenly resounded from the outside of the inn. In an instant, all the disciples from different legatees that had been waiting for a long time shifted their gaze outwards. They saw a new batch of disciples entering the inn. On their body were the auras of a bloody battle. It was apparent that they had gone through the wooden effigy formation. The one in the lead was a tough man wearing linen clothing. He looked like he was around his 20s, and his brows had reached his temples. He looked extremely handsome and had an extraordinary demeanor around him. His gaze was extraordinarily sharp as well. His looks were certainly exceptional. Behind him, there were around 20 new disciples. Although they weren't as extravagant as the man in front of them, they looked rebellious and prideful. Who is this newcomer? Such arrogance. What kind of place does he think this is? Or did they come from the rural areas? An old disciple said in a dissatisfied manner. You don't even know him? Within the past year, after the passageway from the south region to the north region was activated, this was the person that came killing all the way throughout the ancient roads. He was someone that made a name for himself. Booby. North region? So he isn't from our south region. No wonder why he looks different. This year's disciples are very strong. Look at these disciples. Almost all of them are in the 7th or 8th level of the half-step legendary realm. This Booby had even reached the half-step legendary great perfection realm. They're much stronger compared to the last batch of new recruits. Naturally, after all, they had experienced 10 years of war. Those that managed to survive would naturally be much stronger compared to before. Based on the rumors, the normal disciples are much stronger than the last batch. Many talents have emerged from the war. Yi Shiwen listened to their conversations silently. Indeed, this batch of new disciples were stronger than his batch, and their qualities were much higher. As for this Booby, he should be one of this batch's distinguished talents. After all, he was able to cultivate to the half-step legendary great perfection realm. Such talent was already extremely outstanding. When Yi Shiwen left the Yuan sect, he had just barely touched the surface of the legendary realm. Most importantly, the prodigies of the 5 regions would be gathering within the true martial school. Naturally, the new batch of disciples would be stronger than the last batch. You're Booby? Join our lineage. Our lineage is among the top 100 strongest within the true martial school. How about choosing us instead? We're considered top-notch within the top 100 lineage. We only pale in comparison compared to the top 10 legatees. The and that was silent suddenly exploded with a voice of invitation coming from many lineages' disciples. Most of the ones that spoke were within the top 100 strongest lineage within the true martial school. As for the ones outside of the top 100 range, they didn't even dare to open their mouths. After all, it was too shameful. The scornful gaze of others was enough to stop them from speaking. Most importantly, unless something was wrong with them, they would rarely pick the top 100 lineage. It was impossible for them to pick the lineage that was outside of the top 100 range. Any distinguished talent that came to the true martial school naturally hoped for a better environment and more resources for their cultivation. There was no doubt about it. As for those that could provide an environment for the growth of these distinguished talents, they would be the top 10 lineages. There were some lineages among the top 100 lineages that were able to provide such resources as well. However, only a number of them could. This would be mere human nature. Just like Yi Shiwen, if it wasn't because he had no choice, he definitely wouldn't choose the Little Tibetan Star Summit. After all, the Tibetan Star Summit's condition during that time was quite bad. If it wasn't for the fact that it was extremely hard for him to raise his cultivation any longer in the Yuan sect, Yi Shiwen would never make this choice. This could be considered an unintentional development. Yi Shiwen noticed that the recruiters of the top 10 lineage had not appeared yet. Or, they were pridefully waiting for the new disciples to choose them. After all, no matter what, they were the top 10 lineage. There was no doubt about how strong they are. Without any hesitation, he went forward and said, Booby, you're very talented. Are you interested in joining our Tibetan Star Summit? The moment Yi Shiwen appeared, the crowd exploded with noise. No one expected Yi Shiwen to be hiding among them. After all, Yi Ziwen's cultivation was extremely high. As long as he wasn't willing to, these sage realm experts wouldn't be able to see through his disguise. It wasn't that they would be unable to see him. However, they would subconsciously choose to ignore him. This was the most powerful part of Yi Ziwen's aura convergence martial art. Even if they saw Yi Shiwen, they would just view it as a common object that they have seen throughout their daily lives. What? Is that Yi Shiwen? He is here? How didn't we manage to spot him? That's him all right. Isn't that Yi beside him? We're done for. If he wants to recruit, how will we have any chances? This Booby would most likely be entering the Tibetan Star Summit already. That's unfair. This is unfair. The Tibetan Star Summit already has a next-in-line schoolmaster like Huang Wuji and even had a monster like Yi Shiwen. And yet, they want to snatch with us now? Indeed, indeed. However, I heard that the Tibetan Star Summit had announced their plan of returning back to their prime. It is natural for them to recruit new disciples. With these people's strength, the Tibetan Star Summit would reach its prime soon enough. In the past, the Tibetan Star Summit is already among the top 10 lineages. Who knows to what extent would they reach in the future? You're Yi Shiwen? Ingbubi's expression changed a little when he heard Yi Ziwen's name. He never expected Yi Shiwen to recruit himself personally. Yi Shiwen wasn't a little nobody anymore. After the 10 years of warfare, his name became extremely famous throughout the true martial domain. After the rumors that the emergent school leader had died and his hands were spread, it added a few highlights to his legends despite him clarifying that the emergent school leader had self-destructed because of the wounds inflicted by the true martial stone sword, and the school leader's death having nothing to do with himself. His name still shook throughout the world. Even if the emergent school leader had perished by the wounds inflicted by the true martial stone sword, an average person wouldn't be able to chase after him. After all, he was a transcendent realm expert. He could just kill whoever chased after him with a slap. As such, even if Ingbubi was arrogant, an excited expression appeared on his face. Although Yi Shiwen had entered the true martial school earlier than them by one batch, the disparity in strength between them was like the heavens and the earth. As he thought until here, Ingbubi immediately said, "I'm interested." Chapter 781. Chapter 781. The ascension ceremony begins after everyone saw Yi Shiwen recruiting. They immediately knew that it would be hopeless. Yi Shiwen was definitely going to be the next in line Tibetan Star Sun. They didn't know what Yi Shiwen was thinking. They only felt that if nothing happened to him, he would become the next in line Tibetan Star Sun. This much was certain. His invitation was equal to the next in line Tibetan Star Sun's invitation. Even if top 10 legates were here, unless their current chef personally came to recruit the new disciples, they would be unable to surpass Yi Ziwen's weight of invitation. However, that would be impossible. What kind of identity does the top 10 legates have? They were the powerhouses within the true martial school. Although distinguished characters would appear in every recruitment event, they wouldn't personally come out to recruit the new disciples. As expected, after Yi Shiwen proposed his invitation, Ingbubi was already displaying a heavy interest in joining the Tibetan Star Summit. Although the Tibetan Star Summit wasn't part of the top 10 lineage, they were once among them. With such foundations, and the fact that the next-in-line Supreme Schoolmaster was from the Tibetan Star Summit, it was extremely alluring. When the news of Yi Shiwen recruiting Ingbubi into the Tibetan Star Summit was spread around, the disciples of the top 10 lineages pounded their chest. Originally, they wanted to act a little more prideful. In the end, Yi Shiwen was the one that got Ingbubi instead. Although he had yet to enter the school, the fact that he had made his choice wouldn't change. In the past, they wouldn't be so anxious about recruiting. After all, the top 100 lineages weren't comparable to them at all. As a result, they wouldn't be anxious at all. Before those distinguished characters chose which lineage they would like to enter, they would have to consider it very thoroughly. Situations like these had occurred many times. In truth, it's always been like this in the past. As the top 10 lineage, they held their own advantage. However, everything was different now. With Yi Shiwen here, the situation had been changed completely. No matter if it was the charisma of the next-in-line schoolmaster, Huang Wuji or Yi Ziwen's, they shouldn't be underestimated. It became much more apparent after the 10 years of warfare that happened not too long ago. They didn't dare to be arrogant anymore with the interference of Yi Shiwen. They personally went ahead to recruit the new disciples. They fought for the recruitment of the disciples that they had viewed in high regard before. The prodigies, and especially the distinguished talents, were all being recruited by them. Time passed during the fight for recruitment. Very quickly, the open day for the true martial school was over. Compared to the past years, this year's competition was much more intense. After all, many lineages had suffered during the 10 years of warfare, especially the top 10 lineages. After all, they were the main forces of the war. Due to their exceptional losses, they had to quickly replenish their forces. Adding the fact that there was a meddler like Yi Shiwen, the competition became extremely intense. Every disciple among the top 10 lineages were secretly scolding Yi Shiwen for being so shameless. After all, he didn't care what kind of position he possessed, and still personally came out to recruit the distinguished characters. In the end, the top 10 lineages became extremely furious in snatching the new disciples, and quickly sent out their higher-ups to join the fray. In the end, 6 distinguished characters among 30 were snatched away by the Tibetan Star Summit. In the past, the distinguished characters wouldn't be classified as one so quickly. After all, there was only one qualification one needs to meet to be called a distinguished character, and that was whether they could cultivate till the half-step legendary Great Perfection realm. In the past, numerous distinguished characters would still be secretly cultivating. However, the standards of this batch of new disciples were much higher compared to before. Before they even entered the school, they had already reached the half-step legendary Great Perfection realm. In fact, there would be even more people that would enter the Great Perfection half-step legendary realm in the future, and ultimately become a distinguished character, just like Yi Shiwen in the past. The thing that surprised Yi Shiwen was that his elder brother and second eldest sister had both entered the half-step legendary Great Perfection realm, and their names had become well known within an ancient road. His sister-in-law and brother-in-law were also of the 9th level half-step legendary realm. With only a little more effort, they would then enter the half-step legendary Great Perfection realm. The 4 of them worked together and almost killed everything hindering their path within the ancient road. Their performance was much stronger compared to Yi Shiwen in the past. The arrival of this group had even surprised the higher-ups of each lineage. However, seeing how they were all related to Yi Shiwen, they could only choose to give up. Many people's interests were also piqued. Is the Great Yu Empire such a good place? How did so many distinguished characters appear from there? In the last batch of disciples, there were Yi Shiwen, Qi Fifan, and Hua Menghan. Now, there were 2 more of them. 5 distinguished characters had emerged from just 2 batches of disciples. Its efficiency in producing distinguished characters was unimaginable. Even if someone said that a dragon vein was buried deep under the Great Yu Emperor, people would believe him. Otherwise, how could so many talented people emerge from there? However, compared to another grand matter, the recruitment of disciples was negligible. After all, the ascension as the true martial school schoolmaster that everyone was waiting for was about to start. The true martial school had secluded itself from the world for 30 years' time. Within these 30 years, nobody knew how much changes had undergone. Now was a rare chance to have a clear look. No matter if it was the extraterrestrial overlords or the remaining forces within the true martial domain, they both sent their distinguished figure over to have a look. Naturally, they wouldn't want to miss out on such an opportunity. All of a sudden, the true martial school became very lively. The old figures and seniors that secluded themselves from the world for many years arrived one after another. The ascension as a schoolmaster was a huge matter. No matter what, they would have to attend the ceremony as a form of respect. Most importantly, almost all these huge figures of each force were transcendent realm experts, and had even brought a huge bunch of experts along with them. This alone would cause the true martial school to be in an unrest state. Normally, they wouldn't be allowed to get close to the true martial school. Even if they had some activities, they would conduct it in other small worlds. However, it was different this time. The ascension of the true martial school's new schoolmaster was a grand matter. Even the spectating arena was by the ancestral peak. The entire Tibetan Star Summit became exceptionally busy, especially when the new supreme schoolmaster was from their Tibetan Star Summit. They also shared the glory with Huang Wuji's ascension. Early in the morning, everyone in the Tibetan Star Summit had all gathered around. With Yi Feng, Yi Rushue, Ingbubi, and the hundreds of new disciples that entered the Tibetan Star Summit, the desolated Tibetan Star Summit suddenly became very lively. In the eyes of other lineages, the amount of disciples they had very still considered very little. However, for the Tibetan Star Summit that only had one person for a few generations, it was an unprecedented amount. Now, the Tibetan Star Summit was in a joyous mood. With the second senior sister, Lu Yinlan, in the lead, everyone stood up and lined up according to the sequence of whoever joined the Tibetan Star Summit first. They were awaiting the arrival of their master, the Tibetan Star Sun. Beside Yi Shiwen, Bai Jiansong elbowed Yi Shiwen and sent him a voice transmission secretly, little junior brother. Although many disciples had entered, Bai Jiansong was still calling Yi Shiwen his little junior brother, just like how he used to. As for Yi Shiwen, he didn't mind it either. Said Yi Shiwen. I'm afraid that it won't be so peaceful today, said Bai Jiansong. It's been a long time since these extraterrestrial overlords have been eyeing us. Previously, they were merely frightened by our attacks after defeating the emergent school. Yi Shiwen nodded. The current true martial school was merely a paper tiger one. It bared its fangs and attempted to frighten the strong enemies surrounding it. Compared to those extraterrestrial overlords, the true martial school was too weak. Even with the true martial stone sword suppressing them, it would be useless. If they were to team up with each other, the annihilation of the true martial school would only be a matter of time. However, it was precisely because of this that the true martial school couldn't bear to show their weak side. They had to act tough and misguide their perception towards the true martial school. Previously, they didn't have the chance to do so because we secluded ourselves. However, now that the senior brother was going to ascend to the position of the schoolmaster, it might be the best chance to do so. They wouldn't give up on such a chance so easily. When the time comes, I'm afraid that problems might arise one after another, said Bai Jiansong with a sigh. Although his improvements during the past few years had been quick, he felt powerless. Many matters weren't able to be settled by him. If he entered the half-step transcendent realm, he might have some uses. If they dare to cause havoc, it'll show them that we aren't weak either. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. No wonder those old monsters that had been in seclusion for years had come out. Not only do they want to show respect for the senior brother, they also wanted to show off their powers in order to shock the extraterrestrial overlord forces. During this period of time, he had placed all his attention into recruiting new disciples and never paid attention to such matters. He never expected things to escalate into such a serious state. Currently, the true martial domain was in a panic state. As the true martial school, who was like a representative figure for the true martial domain, it was hard for them to make any actions, as they had to worry about the repercussions of every action they made. Only by secluding themselves would they be able to avoid such conflicts. I'm just afraid that they would cause havoc during the ascension ceremony, said Bai Jiansong. If that happened, clashing against each other might be unavoidable. Yi Shiwen remained silent for a while. Just as he wanted to speak, he felt a surge of energy, painted in the color of blood, fanatically surging upwards from his body. It almost seemed like it was about to pierce through the sky. Seeing this, he felt very happy. He immediately used his martial arts to suppress this blood-colored energy. He was bursting with happiness. He never expected the Tianyuan mirror to complete its changes in such a crucial moment, and successfully transformed into a transcendent tool. With a transcendent tool as a form of protection, he would dare to fight against even a transcendent realm expert. After all, not every transcendent realm expert possessed a transcendent tool. If he were to fight against a transcendent realm expert without a transcendent tool, he stood a chance with the protection of the Tianyuan mirror. With this tool, he had the confidence to do so. After putting in quite an amount of effort, he finally suppressed the energy that leaked from the transformation of the Tianyuan mirror. Just as he wanted to speak, a silhouette appeared from the skies. It was the Tibetan star sun. The Tibetan star sun stood in the air and swept his gaze around everyone present. He said in a clear voice, "Let's go to the ascension ceremony." Someone that claims or appears to be powerful or threatening, but is actually ineffectual and unable to withstand challenge. Chapter 782. Chapter 782. Is this the way you treat your guests? In the true martial school, the ascension ceremony of the new supreme schoolmaster was a grand occasion that would only happen once every few thousand years. Naturally, the event's decorations would be very grand as well. Lights were hung up everywhere and almost covered the entire ancestral peak where the schoolmaster's manor was located at. No matter what identity the schoolmaster previously had, they would automatically quit their original legatee after becoming the schoolmaster. The ancestral peak had its own underlings that possessed absolute loyalty to the schoolmaster and were all his to be ordered around. Of course, the schoolmaster's original legatee would become a solid backup for the schoolmaster, just like how it worked with the bridal family. Of course, the schoolmaster would also help the bridal family to gain some benefits. These were unavoidable. As a result, the battle for the schoolmaster title was always extremely intense. Not only would the battle involve the candidates, it also involves the legatees behind them. In the past, such a clash would only happen among the top 10 legatees. This was the first time that a schoolmaster doesn't belong to any of the 10 legatees. However, after thinking about the foundations the Tibetan Star Summit had, everyone didn't object anymore. After all, the Tibetan Star Summit was once among the top 10 legatees. Most importantly, a transcendent realm expert would appear in every generation of the Tibetan Star Summit. If it wasn't for them focusing on the Tibetan Star Sutra, they might have already produced a schoolmaster a long time ago. Numerous legatee representatives were by the enormous ancestral peak. Due to the abundance of the true martial school's disciples, it wasn't possible to fit them all into the ancestral peak, no matter how large it was. Besides, many representatives of the extraterrestrial overlords factions and the true martial domains factions were sent here. As such, every legatee would only be allowed to dispatch a few representatives ahead. Naturally, the Tibetan Star Summit didn't have many people to begin with, and the next-in-line schoolmaster could bring his own family and his bridal family members along. It's been a long time since I've seen the senior brother. I wonder how he is now. He had become the supreme schoolmaster. He must be extremely domineering now, said Deng Shuixin, and she tilted her head in a cute manner. She already had such a personality to begin with. It wouldn't change even if she had become the senior sister of many other disciples. While she was Yi Zaiwen's senior sister, she acted more like a junior sister. Of course, the supreme schoolmaster will definitely be very domineering, said Yang Wenjun. Originally, he expected the senior brother to only become the next Tibetan Star Son. He never expected him to become the next schoolmaster. After all, the schoolmaster's position had always been chosen among the top 10 legatees. As for the Tibetan Star Summit, they had been out of that category for many years. In the Tibetan Star Summit, they were all treated as actual younger generations. As such, they acted very casually and wouldn't put other matters in their mind. When the Tibetan Star Summit group arrived, they were led into a plaza by the ancestral peak. Today's ascension ceremony would be conducted within this plaza. The plaza had been divided into 3 parts. One part was naturally for the representatives of each lineages within the true martial school. It occupied the most space. As for the other part, it was for the extraterrestrial overlords representatives. Those that occupied some parts in the true martial domain had all sent their representatives over. The last part was for the representatives of other forces within the true martial domain. As for the representatives that didn't belong to these huge factions, they didn't even have the chance to enter the plaza. As soon as the Tibetan Star Summit group entered, they saw many of the true martial school's lineage's disciples. The Tibetan Star Summit's group was arranged to be beside the top 10 legatees. As the new schoolmaster's bridal family, along with a transcendent realm expert, the Tibetan Star Sun leading them, they naturally had the qualifications to remain there. However, the Tibetan Star Sun didn't sit together with them. Instead, he sat by the very first row. More than 20 transcendent realm experts of the true martial school had all appeared. They swept their cold gaze across the crowds and prevented anyone from doing anything that would bring harm to the school. After Yi Shiwen sat down, he didn't care about anyone else's actions anymore. Instead, he peacefully entered the Tianyuan mirror. Within the deep parts of the little cosmos within his body, the Tianyuan mirror was emitting a blood-colored radiance, and a majestic power surged from within. It was the power of a transcendent realm expert. Until now, Yi Shiwen had yet to come in contact with that power. Although it was the power of the Tianyuan mirror, Yi Shiwen could use a part of it as his own power. With that power, he wouldn't be so powerless when facing a transcendent realm expert, just like how he was last time. Even if a transcendent realm expert's attacks with full force were to befall upon him, the Tianyuan mirror would block it for him. With this, he would have the qualifications to battle against a transcendent realm expert. The disparity in strength between the half-step transcendent realm and the transcendent realm was like the heavens and earth. No matter how strong a half-step Transcendent Realm expert was, he would be like a suckling in the eyes of a true Transcendent Realm expert. However, with the assistance of the Tianyuan mirror that had evolved into a transcendent tool, everything would be different. He could utilize the power of the Tianyuan mirror to temporarily deal with the Transcendent Realm expert's attacks. Although the power released by the Tianyuan mirror was related to Yi Zaiwen's strength, there was a dragon vein deep within the Tianyuan mirror. He could just utilize the power of the dragon vein, which would allow him to achieve the power level of a Transcendent Realm expert in a short amount of time. However, it would only be temporary. Even the power contained within the dragon vein was unable to continuously allow the Tianyuan mirror to explode with the power of a Transcendent Realm expert. This was just a temporary strength. If he wanted to fight against a Transcendent Realm expert, it would depend on when his Star Beast avatar would enter the Transcendent Realm. When the time comes, only would he be classified among the top-notch experts. When the time comes, no matter how big the world was, he would be able to go anywhere he wanted to. As he thought about this, Yi Shiwen suddenly thought of when he should let the Star Beast clone undergo retribution. Currently, the Star Beast avatar was about to enter the Transcendent Realm. Within the past 30 years, he had built an extremely sturdy foundation for his cultivation. The only thing left for him would be to undergo retribution. After passing the retribution, he would naturally become a Transcendent Realm expert. The Star Beast avatar was already a great sage, great perfection realm, so it would never undergo Heaven's retribution before reaching the Transcendent Realm. However, it was different now. If he wanted to enter the Transcendent Realm, he would have to face a grand Heaven's retribution. Under normal circumstances, the more mutated one was, the more horrifying the Heaven's retribution they would undergo. After contemplating for a while, he decided to find a quieter place to pass the Heaven's retribution after this ceremony ends. He could feel that the anxious atmosphere had not been dispersed yet. On the contrary, as time passed, it was slowly growing more and more. Although he wasn't sure why the extraterrestrial overlords wanted to enter the true martial domain, he knew one thing for sure. If they hadn't seen something that they desired to witness, they wouldn't leave. In fact, it might even cause a huge clash. The true martial school is nothing special. If it wasn't for that true martial stone sword, they would have been crushed flat ages ago. Just as Yi Shiwen was deep within the Tianyuan mirror, a sudden burst of fanatical laughter resounded from far away. Everyone present had an extremely high cultivation. Although it wasn't very loud, this voice wasn't masked at all. In the end, almost everyone present heard this voice. All of a sudden, the entire plaza became quiet. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound and saw someone speaking loudly within the extraterrestrial overlord's area. He wasn't afraid of anything and never placed such a situation in high regard. Yi Shiwen let out a sigh and quickly pulled his mind out. The one that wants to insult us is here. He knew that those extraterrestrial overlords would never let go off such a chance so easily. Although no one would dare to infiltrate the true martial domain so easily, they were willing to do other things like shaming the true martial domain, as long as they were able to pressurize them. Everyone's gaze quickly shifted to the direction of the true martial school. They wanted to see what kind of response the true martial school would have. The Supreme School Master, Huang Wuji, was sitting by the stage. There weren't any expressions written on his face, as if he didn't hear the man's comment. Everyone knew that he must not simply say anything. After all, his words would decide the actions of the true martial school. Everyone was watching at the true martial school's reaction. What kind of reaction would they have after such an insult? Yi Shiwen took a deep breath and stood up. He strided forward towards the man that shouted with a smug smile. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen. They didn't know what he was about to do. Yi Shiwen walked up to the youth with a smile. Then he suddenly took action. He slapped the arrogant person's face with lightning speed. Pa! A clear slap resounded. The arrogant youth that spoke was slapped away. Everyone on the spot was shocked as they just watched Yi Shiwen taking action. No reactions were shown by them. Maybe Yi Zaiwen's actions were too quick, or maybe they never expected Yi Shiwen to suddenly take action, especially when there were so many Transcendent Realm experts around. Ah! The youth suddenly screamed like a pig being butchered. It wasn't because his endurance was bad. Instead, Yi Shiwen was too strong. His flesh was as tough as metal. After receiving the slap, the youth's head was almost torn apart. Even so, his entire row of teeth were crushed. He fell onto the ground and let out a tragic scream. "Why did you do that?" Beside him, a transcendent realm expert leading a group suddenly burst with anger. A terrifying aura oppressed Yi Zaiwen's body with the intention of crushing his body entirely. Is this how you true martial school treat you guest? He was the transcendent realm expert of the White Sun sect, Sun Honghua. He had been cultivating for God knows how many years. Currently, his aura was all oppressing Yi Shiwen, as if it intended on crushing him. A blood-colored brilliance arose from his body and protected him. The overbearing, transcendent realm power's oppression instantly vanished into nothingness. How we treat our guests. Are you acting like a guest? Why don't you look where you are at right now? Didn't your parents teach you manners? Said Yi Shiwen coldly. Chapter 783. Chapter 783. Getting slapped in the face again, Yi Zaiwen's words were harsh. In the next instant, more than 10 glares both shot towards Yi Shiwen from the representatives of the White Sun sect. Yi Zaiwen's slap on this youth wasn't an act of vengeance in their eyes. Instead, his actions just shamed the White Sun sect. Yi Shiwen didn't care at all. "Yes, I just slapped the face from your White Sun sect. What about it?" This youth would only say these kinds of words in such a situation if someone instructed them to do so or was uneducated like what Yi Shiwen said. After all, he was giving out such atrocious comments in such a location. If someone instructed him to do so, it would imply their provocation against the true martial school in an attempt to shame the school. Everyone knew what the Supreme School Master meant to the true martial school. On such an occasion where the Ascension ceremony was happening, saying such words would be publicly shaming the Supreme Schoolmaster. It would also cause defamation towards the true martial school. If that were the case, it would imply an all-out war against the true martial school. If they were to take action, the White Sun sect's experts would be annihilated completely. No matter if the White Sun sect would seek revenge against them or not, they would be dead for sure. If it weren't, then it would merely be the conflict between Yi Shiwen and the youth. Contempt painted on Yi Zaiwen's face. There were some matters where his senior brother, Huang Wuji, was unable to do due to inconvenience. However, he didn't have to care about the repercussions. Things had already reached such a level. There was no need to maintain a peaceful atmosphere between them. Could it be that you ordered him to do so? Yi Shiwen ignored Sun Honghua's overbearing aura. A normal person wouldn't be able to withstand the oppression of a transcendent realm expert. However, utilizing the Tianyuan mirror, Yi Shiwen was able to ignore Sun Honghua's aura. Song Qinghua's nerves were popping, and he was boiling with rage deep down. However, he would never admit that he made the order such circumstances. Otherwise, things would escalate even further. Of course not. Sun Honghua squeezed these words out through his teeth. Under the situation where he wasn't able to take action, using his aura to oppress Yi Shiwen would be the simplest way to deal with him. If Yi Shiwen were to make a fool out of himself, Sun Honghua would be able to regain his pride. However, to his surprise, Yi Shiwen didn't even budge from it, as if his aura were non-existing. He couldn't do anything to Yi Shiwen at all. It's great that it's not your order. You're also aware that this is my senior brother's ascension ceremony, and everyone's a little anxious here. I'll be bad if we started a fight here. Yi Shiwen smiled, as if he was a despicable man that had won a fight. It immediately made Sun Honghua boil with rage. Yi Shiwen greatly angered him. However, I still think that your White Sun sect should educate your disciples better. Having people of such caliber around would only tarnish your reputation. Isn't that right? He can't even withstand one of my slaps, and yet he intends to criticize our true martial school. He doesn't have the qualifications to do so. Understand? After hearing what Yi Shiwen said, everyone immediately noticed something. The youth was a half-step transcendent realm expert, and yet his teeth were shattered, and his skull was cracked open. What kind of strength does Yi Shiwen now possess? His strength was strong beyond comprehension. It was absolutely unbelievable. Many people felt this way. Adding on the fact that he wasn't affected by Sun Honghua's aura at all, they thought, could it be that he has ascended into the transcendent realm? Many true martial school disciples had the same thought. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't believe it at all. However, if it was Yi Shiwen, they became uncertain of it. Yi Shiwen was a legend in the true martial school. In the short span of 100 years, his cultivation had shot towards the half-step transcendent realm. It was already unbelievable to begin with. Every time when someone thought that they saw the true extent of his strength, he would explode with an even stronger combat power, which would shock everyone. It was impossible to tell how strong he was. Now 30 years have passed. Many people thought he could have entered the transcendent realm already. Sun Honghua's anger escalated greatly, with his heart almost burst because of it. However, he couldn't do anything to Yi Shiwen. Of course, Yi Shiwen knew that they wouldn't dare to harm him. After all, this was the most important location of the true martial school. If they dared to take action, they would die a horrible death. Although his heart was almost bursting from rage, he forcefully squeezed out an ugly smile. Thanks for worrying. However, our White Sun Sect disciples would naturally be taught by the White Sun Sect. I'm just afraid that your education system is lacking, and the rules of your White Sun Sect are too lax. A smile flashed across Yi Zaiwen's mouth. Currently, he knew that the true martial school had to stand strong against any kinds of challenges thrown towards them. A lion or a tiger might not eat a wolf. However, if the wolf was gravely wounded, they might rush towards the wolf and gobble it up. As Yi Shiwen was speaking, his gaze swept towards the other extraterrestrial overlords' representatives and saw quite a few prideful youths among them. He smiled lightly and said, I just hope that matters like these wouldn't happen anymore. Otherwise, it would be awkward for everyone in this ceremony. The other extraterrestrial overlord forces felt that their faces were burning hot, as if Yi Zaiwen's slap had also landed on their face. Previously, they came to a silent agreement. They wanted to wait for the youth to cause a ruckus, and they would then support him to criticize the true martial school through oppression. They wanted the true martial school to be in an awkward situation. However, before their plan even worked, Yi Shiwen had already slapped them across the face. The slap made their face ache, which made them feel an extreme shame under such a situation. You're just a mere half-step transcendent realm. How dare you be so presumptuous in front of us? Have you gotten tired of living? A transcendent realm expert spoke. He was the elder in one of the extraterrestrial overlord forces, the Meteor Sect. True martial school is so arrogant. Have you forget your manners after the decline? That's right. The true martial school is too arrogant. How dare you let your disciple insult us? Do you want to incite a war between our two factions? That's right. You must force this kid to kneel and apologize. Otherwise, the flames of our anger wouldn't be quenched. In an instant, numerous extraterrestrial overlord experts spoke out as a form of agreement, and their aura increased tremendously. There were a huge amount of experts here to begin with. The ones leading each team were also transcendent realm experts. If this wasn't in the true martial school, and they were oblivious of what kinds of methods the true martial school had prepared to deal with them, they would have caused a ruckus a long time ago. Initially, they were shocked by Yi Zaiwen's words. After recovering from the shock, they got even angrier. Now that someone took the lead to speak against the true martial school, they naturally went ahead to support him. Although they were foes within the true martial domain, they were unexpectedly cooperative with each other when facing the true martial school, the local force of the true martial domain. The Meteor Sect's elder smiled coldly as he walked out. Today, it'll let you understand how sinful it is to disrespect someone in the transcendent realm. If you don't kneel by today, it'll break your legs to let you kneel. The aura of the Meteor Sect's elder increased tremendously. Every time he walked forward, the aura became more oppressive, as if he was climbing a flight of stairs. His aura was terrifying. However, he wasn't able to oppress Yi Shiwen. Every time his aura got stronger, the blood-colored aura on Yi Zaiwen's body grew stronger. It was like a tit for that situation. Yi Shiwen was purposefully going against the meteor's sex elder. Two majestic auras clashed against each other midair. The fabrics of space were almost torn apart, and the aura extended towards the void. If it wasn't because for the ancestral peak space being much more solid, the entire space itself might have crumbled. This was the clash of aura between transcendent realm experts. Although Yi Shiwen wasn't a transcendent realm expert, he had the Tianyuan mirror to protect himself. He wasn't afraid of the aura at all. The meteor's sex elder moved. In an instant, his palm was already landing towards Yi Shiwen. Thousand Star-Lord Fist. Boundless starlights were emitted from his palm, one after another. They formed into a huge net and instantly crashed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Zaiwen's expression became serious. He naturally knew of the meteor's sex Thousand Star-Lord Fist. In fact, he even knew how to use it. However, his perception of the Thousand Star-Lord Fist wasn't even comparable to the Elder. The Elder's Thousand Star-Lord Fist was genuinely horrifying. The net was seemingly boundless, and Yi Shiwen wasn't able to escape it at all. The fist intent that filled the skies was endless and was about to crush him. Just as Yi Shiwen wanted to fight back and was attempting to activate the Tianyuan mirror, an old hand suddenly extended from the void. With just a casual grab, the starlights that filled the skies were torn apart, as if it was merely something insignificant. Then, the huge hand flung itself towards the meteor's sex elder. Although it seemed slow, its speed was rapid, as if a few centuries had passed by in an instant. The meteor's sex elder could only watch the hand slapping his face. Slap! Another loud and clear slap resounded. It came so suddenly, and everything happened too quickly. No one expected such a change in the situation to occur. Just as they watched the meteor's sex elder oppressing Yi Shiwen, another hand appeared out of the blue and slapped the meteor's sex elder. Blood was leaking out from the meteor's sex elder's mouth. With just one hit of the terrifying strength that bombarded him, his inner organs were almost destroyed. With a tremendous effort, the meteor's sex elder finally managed to suppress the horrifying strength. Who dares to attack me?" The meteor's sex elder yelled. His gaze instantly swept towards the crowd of the true martial school's transcendent realm experts. In such a situation, the only one that had the reason to attack and was capable of attacking would only be these people. The huge red mark on his face wouldn't be gone within a short time, as if it were insulting his ignorance. He was in an embarrassed situation right now. When he attacked, he was already on guard against any attacks coming from the true martial school. And yet, even though he had put on his guard, he was still slapped by someone. Chapter 784. Chapter 784. "Am shaming you, what about it?" For him, this was a shame. They were both transcendent realm experts. One side already had their intentions early on, while the other was not aware of anything. Although it was an attack prepared for a long time, it didn't cause Yi Shiwen to embarrass himself in public. Instead, he was slapped by someone. Not only did this slap cause damage to his physical body, but it also damaged his mentality. He was a very prideful person. Under the starry skies, transcendent realm experts were all top-notch characters. And yet, he had been slapped by someone. The void trembled as if it was the surface of the water. Ripples appeared, and a silhouette appeared from within. It was the Old City Lord. Currently, the Old City Lord didn't have his usual kind appearance anymore. Instead, there was only coldness that was emitted deep from his heart. His ice-cold gaze made one feel like they had fallen into an ice cove. He said coldly, "If you want to lose face so badly, allow me to help you." Yi Shiwen had never seen such a cold expression on the Old City Lord before. That old body didn't seem like it was old at all. Instead, it was surging with an unprecedented eagerness for a fight. The terrifying aura of a battle god expanded and harshly crashed upon the extraterrestrial overlord experts' hearts. It was unimaginable. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but guess what identity the Old City Lord possessed. After all, he had such a horrifying aura. Even among experts in the transcendent realm, there were weak ones and strong ones. Obviously, the Old City Lord was a top-notch expert even within the transcendent realm experts. He was peerless and unmatched, and was much stronger than the transcendent realm experts that Yi Shiwen had seen. His strength was even close to the emergent school leader. He dares to insult us. I merely wanted to educate him and make him abide by the rules. When the Meteor Sect's elder saw the Old City Lord, his aura instantly became stagnant. The previous attack alone made him realize the disparity in strength between him and the Old City Lord. He also understood how unwise it would be to go against the Old City Lord now. Rules? What kind of rules do I not know of? He's my true martial school's disciple. He just needs to abide by the true martial school's rules. Who are you to have the courage to educate him? In the past, when I was still fighting against your old sect master, you weren't even there to witness it. How dare you act so arrogantly in front of me? The Old City Lord's gaze landed on the Meteor Sect's elder. It instantly made him feel like he had fallen into an ice pit. Everyone instantly became silent, especially the extraterrestrial overlord experts. Usually, they were fighting for dominance deep within the starry skies. Their perceptions would naturally be much stronger than the experts within the true martial domain. Naturally, they knew of the Meteor Sect's old sect master. Although he had already retired for thousands of years, his name was still extremely famous. Some said that he was in seclusion to comprehend the great Tao, while others said that he had already perished. However, everyone knew the matter of the Meteor Sect's old sect master massacring everyone beneath the starry skies, and was unmatched. In fact, he had even calmed down the riot that happened within the Meteor Sect. And yet, this old man had fought against the Meteor Sect's old sect master before. No one would doubt him for having such a vast amount of experience. After all, although the forces of the true martial school were limited to be within the true martial domain, some true martial school disciples would occasionally go adventuring deep within the starry skies. There was a possibility for him to have fought against the Meteor Sect's old sect master before. This made it much more terrifying. No one knew that such an old person existed within the true martial school. He was just like a living fossil. Although he had fought against the Meteor Sect's old sect master before, the old sect master was someone that had already retired from the world for thousands of years. Many people even spread rumors that he had passed away. Although no one knew if the Meteor Sect's old sect master had already perished or not, it was a reality that this old man was currently still vivacious. Many true martial school's disciples were also shocked. They never expected the Old City Lord of the Exile City to have such a glorious past. Many people, even the transcendent realm experts, were oblivious of the Old City Lord's past. When they entered the true martial school, the Old City Lord was already here and had become the City Lord of the Exile City. They never expected him to have such a glorious past. Usually, no matter what, the Old City Lord would present himself to be very kind. No one expected him to have such a domineering side. This is the ascension ceremony of our true martial school's new schoolmaster. Do you want to wage war upon our true martial school? It'll give you two choices as well. First, atone to your sins by dying, or you can also kneel and apologize. The Old City Lord didn't even bother looking at the Meteor Sect's elder. His gaze was ice cold, as if he was looking at a dead person. The Meteor Sect's elder's face was instantly flushed red. His heart was feeling frustrated, and he wanted to vent out his anger. However, he couldn't do so. Facing this peerless expert that had fought against his sect's old sect master, he understood that he wouldn't have any chances of winning. There was an essential gap in strength between the two of them. You're going overboard with the bullying. The Meteor Sect's elder yelled in anger, with his face flushed red. He only felt that the Old City Lord was bullying him to the extreme. However, he never thought about the fact that he was challenging the true martial school's new schoolmaster during his ascension ceremony. From the perspective of the true martial school disciples, he was also bullying them to the extreme. To the true martial school, the supreme schoolmaster was of utmost importance. Wasn't he also going overboard when he decided to challenge the schoolmaster during his ascension ceremony? Naturally, he wouldn't think that way. He would only feel that the true martial school was going overboard. After all, They were forcing him to kneel. This was to humiliate the meteor sect. This senior, aren't you a little too arrogant? The White Sun sect's elder, Sun Honghua, stepped forward and spoke. He wanted to use this chance to put pressure on the city lord. We're here to congratulate the true martial school sincerely. Is this how you treat your guest? Do you want to humiliate us? Scram aside. There's no qualification for you to speak here, said the old city lord as he coldly glared at the White Sun sect's elder. He was ice cold and overbearing. We're all extraterrestrial overlords. What are your intentions in shaming us? Do you intend to wage war between the true martial school and us? The meteor sect's elder blurted out with these words with his face still flushed red. As he was speaking, he looked at the true martial school's disciples upon the stage. These words were threats. Although this was the true martial school's territory, the true martial school's disparity in strength against the forces backing them up was huge. To his surprise, no expression was displayed on the disciples of the true martial school, as if they never heard of what he spoke. The silence was their way of agreeing and supporting the old city lord's actions. Wage a huge war? With your capabilities? You don't have such capabilities to do so, said the old city lord without being courteous. He was overbearing, and his aura was as sharp as blades. An unprecedented, intense aura surged, and it was impossible to see through it. The meteor sect elder's aura became stagnant. Indeed, even if he was killed on the spot, and the meteor sect wanted to cause a ruckus, it would be hard to incite a war between the two huge figures. After all, he was just a transcendent realm expert. If they were to fight against each other, it might result in the death of 10 or more transcendent realm experts. It wasn't worth it at all. As such, just like the emergent school leader had previously said, waging war for Yi Shiwen was merely a guise and a mere joke. It happened because they had already intended to wage war. As for the matters regarding Yi Shiwen, it was merely a guise. No one would believe that the emergent school leader would attack the true martial school in such a fanatical manner just because Yi Shiwen had killed one of their great sages. A great sage was nothing at all to them. Even if it was a transcendent realm expert, it was nothing compared to two massive forces. If the meteor sect were to attack them one day, it would be because they knew every detail regarding the true martial school and had nothing to fear anymore. It would not happen just because of the death of an elder. Currently, so many extraterrestrial overlords were staring intently at the true martial school, and yet they didn't dare to attack them. After all, they couldn't tell how strong the true martial school was now and couldn't understand the conditions of the true martial stone sword. Even if all of you are dead, they would still do what they should do. Don't regard yourself too highly. The old city lord glared at the crowd. He didn't pay attention to any of them at all. Even in the transcendent realm, there were strong ones and weak ones. It was apparent that no one present was able to go against the old city lord. Make your choice. Atone to your sins by dying, or kneel down and apologize, said the old city lord. You, the meteor sect's elder, was extremely angry. However, he dared not refute him. If he were at any other place, he would have already refuted him. However, this was the true martial school. If he were to refute, it would only result in him being killed on the spot. He knew that what the old city lord said was correct. Even if he died, it would be useless. Before the meteor sect indeed decided on waging war against the true martial school, the war wouldn't happen. Enough! Today's a joyous day for me. It'll just spare his life. Upon the big stage, Huang Wuji finally spoke. There weren't any emotions within his words, and it was unknown what he was thinking. He'll forgive you this time, thanks to the schoolmaster. However, if any of you dare to speak such words again, I won't forgive you. The old city lord's gaze was ice cold and was sharp as blades. He swept his gaze towards the crowd, stepped forward, and disappeared in thin air. When he reappeared, he was already seated among the true martial school's transcendent realm experts. Yi Shiwen intended to go back, but these extraterrestrial overlords that had the intentions of challenging the true martial school didn't stop just because of that. The ones that were humiliated previously were the elders of the Meteor sect and the White Sun sect. However, since the others weren't humiliated, they didn't care at all. I heard that the true martial school's new schoolmaster is a heroic youth. He's able to ascend to the schoolmaster's position at such a young age. Our heavenly martial sect has a heroic youth as well and intends on challenging the schoolmaster. Do you have the courage to agree to it? Said a middle-aged transcendent realm expert with a mustache on his face. The true martial school instantly experienced an uproar. Chapter 785. Chapter 785. Using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, I heard that the true martial school's new schoolmaster is a heroic youth. He's able to ascend to the schoolmaster's position at such a young age. Our heavenly martial sect has a heroic youth as well and intends on challenging the schoolmaster. Do you have the courage to agree to it? Said a middle-aged transcendent realm expert with a mustache on his face. The true martial school instantly experienced an uproar. The reason was straightforward. The heavenly martial sect wanted to challenge the schoolmaster with one of their disciples. Anger instantly painted everyone's faces. It was a blatant challenge while belittling the true martial schoolmaster. Never mind Huang Wuji's cultivation strength. His status was already equal to the numerous overlords that held high authority. In reality, based on the positions of everyone present, no one could match up to him. Even these extraterrestrial overlord elders' status was lower than Huang Wuji's. Naturally, the youth of their sect would have an even weaker status. It wasn't just lower by a few levels. Even the seniority was entirely different. There was no way to compare the two of them together. And yet, the heavenly martial sect's elder wanted to let their young talents challenge Huang Wuji. Wasn't he just planning on shaming the true martial school? Do you see this? The true martial school's schoolmaster isn't worth anything. He's just comparable to the youth in our sect. This sentence made Huang Wuji enter an awkward situation. If he accepted, it would disgrace his seniority. If he rejected, he would be considered to have chickened out. Even if he won, nothing beneficial would happen. After all, it was expected that the schoolmaster could defeat a youth. However, if he lost, the entire true martial domain would know that the true schoolmaster had lost to a youth. Everyone understood what kind of dangerous intentions they harbored and displayed an angry expression on their face. He was purely humiliating the true martial school. Even if he didn't do anything, he would be able to degrade the true martial school. As such, the true martial school's disciples were furious. For so many years, although the true martial school hadn't been governing the true martial domain, they were still a huge force. Even a vast force of the true martial domain wouldn't have the courage to act so presumptuously. However, ever since these extraterrestrial overlords arrived, the true martial school felt an apparent pressure from them. They were more potent than the true martial school. Even the various forces that were going against true martial school were annihilated by these extraterrestrial overlord forces, which had shocked the entire world. They didn't even hold the true martial school in high regard and were scornful towards them. They treated the true martial domain as the indigenous people of a rural area. Thinking back to the glorious state of the true martial school and how these people would belittle them like they were some indigenous people, the disciples of the true martial school held a deep rage within their hearts. Now, these extraterrestrial overlords wanted to use this method to shame them. It made everyone throughout the true martial school rage. Even Yi Zaiwen's expression was gruesome. These extraterrestrial overlords are persistent. Even God would get angry. However, the heavenly martial sect's elders' gaze traversed through the void and looked at Huang Wuji, who was on the stage, along with his ethereal voice. He didn't care about the true martial school's rage. Shame? Nope. For him, this wasn't counted as shaming them. He merely wanted to test the strength of the true martial school. The true martial school suddenly changed their schoolmaster, which caused the outside world to ponder what had happened. Some people said that the true martial school's schoolmaster had exhausted all his vigor during the last 10 years of warfare and was about to perish soon. There were also many kinds of rumors. For the extraterrestrial overlords that had been coveting on true martial domain for many years, they wanted to know what had happened. Since it was impossible for them to challenge the original schoolmaster, they would challenge the new schoolmaster. Based on the strength of the new schoolmaster, They would be able to guess if the ascension was rushed, or if it had already been in preparation for a long time. If it happened because they were in a rush, the extraterrestrial overlords would have a vague understanding of true martial school strength. If the ascension of the new schoolmaster happened too rashly, and Huang Wuji was merely a replacement for the empty spot, it would imply that the formal schoolmaster was deeply wounded during the last 10 years of warfare. The Supreme Schoolmaster had only attacked once during the 10 years of war. If so, then he was receiving backlash from the true martial stone sword. It would also imply that the true martial stone sword couldn't be used continuously, and there were specific reasons for such a strength to be unleashed. In other words, without the pressure of the true martial stone sword, the true martial school would be like a small white rabbit, while the extraterrestrial overlords would become a pack of hungry wolves and tigers. Without any protection, it could only await its fate of being massacred. Although the true martial school was much stronger than the forces within the true martial domain, it was useless. Without the protection and pressure of the true martial stone sword, forces in true martial domain might get defeated by the oppression of the extraterrestrial forces. After all, the true martial school was now considered the local representative force of the true martial domain. If the true martial school were to be destroyed, the other true martial domain forces would have to contemplate whether they should leave the true martial domain. Even if they left the true martial domain, their future was uncertain. But it was still much better than being annihilated. However, such actions were undoubtedly considered blatant provocations to the true martial school's disciples. This untalented Ran Qingtian would like to be given pointers by the schoolmaster. At this moment, a youth martial warrior stepped out at an appropriate moment. His figure was huge, had thick eyebrows and huge eyes. His aura was sharp and domineering, and he was exuding the aura of a transcendent realm expert. He had just entered the transcendent realm very recently and had yet to stabilize his cultivation. And yet, he was dragged here. It was apparent how urgent the situation was. At the same time, it was apparent how much of a difference in strength the true martial school and these overlords possessed. Within the true martial school, other than the senior brother, Huang Wuji, who was being nurtured with utmost priority, no one else had entered the transcendent realm. Even Mu Xingjie had only reached the half-step transcendent late realm. He was still far away from ascending to the transcendent realm. The disparity in strength was extremely apparent. Wei Mingyang of the 8-star school. Also willing to accept pointers from the schoolmaster, said another white-shirt man that walked forward and cupped his hands. He was from the 8-star school, one of the extraterrestrial overlords. His strength wasn't any different compared to that of Ran Qingtian. Mu Qin Man of the 10 Extremities sect would like to challenge the schoolmaster as well. It was an extreme beauty that looked like she was around 20 years old. Her long red robes highlighted the perfect outline of her body. On her delicate face was a few hints of coldness. Although she had just ascended to the transcendent realm, she had ascended after all. She was still a powerhouse figure that was a little lower in terms of seniority. Her body was already surging with the demeanor of a transcendent realm expert. Shi Zhiyong of the Ancient Origins Palace would like to join in as well. This was a middle-aged-looking martial warrior. His body was leaking with a mature aura that was much thicker than the sharp character that others possessed. The faces of everyone in the true martial school instantly turned pale. This is pure provocation. It is a provocation that is planned for a long time. They had most likely already discussed these beforehand. Otherwise, how could they have 4 new transcendent realm experts at such an appropriate timing? Isn't this purely for shaming us? Some people were thinking much deeper into it. They realized that they were miles apart from the extraterrestrial overlords. At least, their nurturing of the transcendent realm experts were much weaker. If it weren't for them nurturing Huang Wuji with utmost priority during the past few years, which allowed him to enter the transcendent realm, there wouldn't be anyone in the transcendent realm within the youth. However, these overlords had such talented youth. Although they were considerably younger, each of them possessed an unparalleled strength. A transcendent realm expert would be respected no matter where they go. As for a young transcendent realm expert, they wouldn't be underestimated no matter where they are. They gave in all their efforts and finally managed to nurture one. And yet, these overlords had casually found 4 of them. For the true martial school, this was an unimaginable amount of pressure. The 4 of them attacked at the same time, and their terrifying auras connected as they lunged towards Huang Wuji, who was by the stage. Even the skies seemed like it was about to fall from the oppression of such a terrifying aura. Any one of their attacks would wipe out an area. With the 4 of them, it was terrifying even if they were just leaking their aura. Many true martial school's disciples were already feeling a little despair. The 4 of them were too strong. Even the aura that they leaked out alone was already so terrifying. It would be unimaginable if they were to attack. Although Huang Wuji had been famous for many years, it wasn't enough to curb their worries. If his opponent was merely in the half-step transcendent realm, everyone believes that he would win. After all, he had been famous for many years, and his strength was extraordinary. However, among the transcendent realm, Huang Wuji was just an amateur that had just ascended very recently. It was hard for others to believe him. The row of half-step, transcendent realm, youthful experts below stared at the 4 experts in an unresigned manner. Mu Xingjie was already not far off from the transcendent realm, yet he felt helpless. He was just half a step away. However, even with this half step alone, it made the disparity in strength between him and these 4 top-notch experts as huge as the distance between the skies and the earth. Can a half-step transcendent realm expert be compared with a transcendent realm expert? Of course not. As such, they had no choice and could only watch these 4 people shame the true martial school. After all, even if they went up, it would only result in their death. They wouldn't even be able to withstand an attack. Even if they had just ascended to the transcendent realm for a short while and have yet to stabilize their cultivation, it was simple enough to kill them. At such a moment, they could only tighten their fist with a pale face. They wouldn't even be able to stand up against them. Everyone looked at the Supreme Schoolmaster and wanted to see how he would react. In truth, in such a situation, he would be in the wrong no matter how he dealt with it, whether he accepted the challenge or not. What a joke! My senior brother has to take action to deal with all of you? There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. A clear voice resounded from the side. Chapter 786. Chapter 786. Come at me together. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound and realized that it was none other than the Yi Shiwen that had yet to back off previously. Yi Shiwen had a slothful attitude, and he slowly walked over to them. Everyone widened their eyes and looked at Yi Shiwen. They didn't know what Yi Shiwen would do. If it were previously, they wouldn't care about such an insignificant character like Yi Shiwen. However, after the previous matters, they didn't dare to look down on such an irrelevant character like Yi Shiwen anymore. The previous slap had already displayed his bravery. He was genuinely overflowing with audacity. He was someone that would be hard to deal with. When such a person suddenly interrupts during such a situation, it made people wary of him. Can't he tell what kind of situation this is? When transcendent realm experts take action, an insignificant character like him wouldn't have the chance to step into it. Or he shouldn't even have come out. Otherwise, he would be stepped on by others at any time. And yet, he had appeared. It made many people confused as to what he wanted to do. You again? The meteor sex elder and the group glared at Yi Shiwen. It was because of Yi Shiwen that they were humiliated by the Old City Lord. However, they didn't dare to put the blame on the Old City Lord. After all, they knew that the Old City Lord was much stronger than them. As for Yi Shiwen, they weren't worried about him at all. You again? Do you want to die? If that's the case, it'll fulfill your desire. Wei Mingyang, who clad in white clothes, glared coldly at Yi Shiwen as if he was looking at a corpse. He disregarded Yi Shiwen at all, as he felt that Yi Shiwen didn't have the qualifications to speak to him on equal grounds. Yi Shiwen was just a mere great sage. Even if he was in the half-step transcendent realm, the disparity in strength still exists. They only understood how laughable their thoughts were after they managed to ascend to the transcendent realm. The disparity in strength between a half-step transcendent realm expert and a transcendent realm expert was too huge. Transcendent realm was an entirely different caliber. Previously, They were looked down upon by such people. Now, they had the qualifications to look down on others. Just like how Yi Shiwen hated them, they didn't like this person that kept meddling with the situation either. I'm just telling the truth. Who are you guys? Do you think you have the qualifications to let my senior brother take action personally? It's truly crushing a nut with a sledgehammer. I alone am sufficient in dealing with the four of you, said Yi Shiwen as he squinted his eyes with a smile. At such a moment, he was forced to come out. After all, no matter what his senior brother did, he would be in the wrong. Without accepting the match, it meant that he chickened out. If he took the match, he would be laughed upon by others, no matter if he won or lost. If he won, he would be said to bully others. If he lost, he would be called someone that couldn't even defeat someone of the newer generation. Very quickly, people would be able to determine the strength of the true martial school. This was precisely the part which the true martial school didn't want others to see the most. As such, Yi Shiwen had no choice but to step out now in such a situation. Seems like you want to die. If that's the case, allow me to fulfill your desire, said Wei Yongming in a cold manner. His white shirt swayed lightly by the gentle winds. He seemed like a white god of death with the ice-cold, killing intent enveloping the sky. It's pointless for all of you to come one after another, said Yi Shiwen. The four of you can come to attack me together. After all, there's no difference. Presumptuous. Arrogant. Is the true martial school filled with such people? Arrogant. Just as Yi Shiwen finished speaking, the representatives of the extraterrestrial overlords immediately yelled. From their perspective, Yi Shiwen wasn't anything special. Although his previous attack was outstanding and managed to shatter the teeth of a half-step transcendent realm expert, a half-step transcendent realm expert and a transcendent realm expert was different in terms of strength. If provoking a transcendent realm expert meant death, provoking four at once simply meant speeding up the process. Arrogant? Am I as arrogant as you bunch? What identity do four of you have? You think you have the qualifications to challenge my senior brother? Said Yi Shiwen as he exposed these people's intentions without any sense of formality. These people who recently ascended to the transcendent realm might be a powerhouse figure within their sect. However, their identity wasn't comparable to Huang Wuji at all. In fact, among everyone present, Huang Wuji held the highest position. Not only did these people not respect him in the slightest, they even provocated Huang Wuji. This was true arrogance. Compared to them, Yi Ziwen's actions were nothing. If you're seeking death, let me fulfill your wish. At this moment, Wei Mingyang attacked. His anger had already hit its limits. Yi Shiwen was thoroughly shaming him right now. Who do you think you are? How dare you act so presumptuous in front of me? It's been too long since someone dared to act like this in front of him. Although he was still considered a youth, he was a transcendent realm expert. When one reaches this stage, they tend to be prideful. They wouldn't be able to bear with Yi Ziwen's provocations. His figure flickered, and he instantly reached in front of Yi Shiwen, as if he had teleported. Just as he wanted to grab Yi Shiwen suddenly disappeared into thin air. Are you thinking of running away? Wei Mingyang yelled towards the sky. As expected, a ray of golden light appeared, and Yi Ziwen's silhouette appeared at that spot. Although he could guess where he was, it was useless because of how fast Yi Ziwen's speed was. Even if he could guess where he was, he wouldn't be able to catch up to his speed within such a short time. Escape? Humph, that battlefield is merely too small. If you have the capabilities, fight together by the starry skies. Don't come to me one by one. How about four of you come to me all at once? After all, there wouldn't be any pressure in dealing with all of you. Yi Shiwen smiled coldly and said in a scornful tone. He didn't hold those four transcendent realm experts in high regard at all. Yi Ziwen's casual tone angered the other three transcendent realm experts. Their rage surged, like lava surging out of a flaming volcano. Brat, you must be tired of living. Ran Chengshin's nose flared from anger. With how he managed to ascend to the transcendent realm at such a young age, he was naturally very prideful. After being continuously provoked by Yi Shiwen, he couldn't take it any longer and instantly chased after Yi Shiwen. Behind Ran Qingtian, Mu Qingman and Shi Zhiyong followed after him. However, they didn't have the intention of attacking. They merely followed him out of anger. They didn't feel that they needed to attack at all. If all of them were to attack together, they would be extremely shameful. A few Transcendent Realm experts can't even deal with a great sage? Wouldn't that be a huge joke? If words about this were spread out, they would be extremely shameful. As for others, they didn't even budge. They expanded their spiritual senses and were witnessing everything happening by the starry skies. Some people in the true martial school were very anxious. They knew how strong Yi Shiwen was. He had slain multiple half-step Transcendent Realm experts before. However, everyone thought the same thing. How could a half-step Transcendent Realm expert be compared to a Transcendent Realm expert? The former had no qualifications to be compared to the latter at all. Yi Shiwen stood up at such a moment to assist Huang Wuji and prevent him from being shamed. However, such an act was useless. He wouldn't be able to deal with Transcendent Realm experts, and there were 4 of them. Only death awaits him now. When he dies, they would still want to challenge Huang Wuji forcefully. When the time comes, things would be hard to deal with. After all, the older generations wouldn't be able to take action at all. If they took action, they would be classified as one that bullies others with seniority. This would imply that the true martial school was truly weak right now. However, the real issue here was that the true martial school was currently very weak indeed. They knew about how vulnerable they were. Among the younger generations, other than Huang Wuji, no one else would be able to suppress the situation. Mu Xingjie, who was a half-step Transcendent Late Realm, wouldn't be considered bad. However, he was a tad weaker than these distinguished overlords prodigies who had ascended to the Transcendent Realm. And yet, with such minuscule difference between them, Mu Xingjie was unable to deal with them. Although they knew how weak they were, they couldn't expose it at all. This was the biggest problem present. Everyone had an anxious expression on their face, especially the higher-ups of the true martial school. They knew of Yi Ziwen's talents. He would be able to ascend to the Transcendent Realm in the future for sure. It would be a pity if he were to die in such a situation. Hesitation appeared on many people's faces. Even if they had to take action, they wanted to assure Yi Ziwen's safety. It was a waste to let Yi Shiwen die just like that. As if he had seen through the thoughts of the higher-ups of the true martial school, the heavenly martial sect's elder strode forward and said, "Since it's a spar, there might be times where accidents happen. Hopefully, everyone will forgive such mistakes." Everyone in the true martial school immediately became angry. They were taking advantage of the situation and planned to kill Yi Shiwen. They first used words to prevent the true martial school from interfering and allow the 4 Transcendent Realm disciples to kill Yi Shiwen. Such cruelty! Everyone in the true martial school hated the elder badly, especially the disciples in the Tibetan Star Summit. Yi Feng and Yi Ruxue were both incredibly anxious. Previously, they only knew that their little brother was extremely well known within the true martial school and had made a name for himself. However, they never expected him to face such dangers. He had just entered the true martial school. Because Yi Shiwen makes things much easier for them, the experience they had was much different from the dire situation Yi Shiwen had previously faced. Everything was successful for them. However, only by now did he understood a little about the dangers that Yi Shiwen had encountered within the true martial school. Chapter 787. Chapter 787. Fight against a Transcendent Realm expert? That's impossible. Indeed. Now, Yi Shiwen was well known within the true martial school. However, the respect he acquired was traded with him, always putting his life on the line. If it weren't for him to continue risking his life to fight others and escape death numerous times, he wouldn't have such status and popularity. There wasn't any cheating involved within. Before they arrived here, he had never expected such things to happen. This was different from when they were in Yi Yuan's sect. In Yi Yuan's sect, he had his father to shield him from hazardous situations. Later, Ling Zhantian was protecting him as well. As such, most circumstances wouldn't be too hazardous for him. However, after truly entering the true martial school, everything was completely different. No one could shield Yi Shiwen anymore. Besides, he had offended the extremely influential law enforcement hall upon entering the school. For a new disciple, it was an extremely dire situation, and yet he had managed to overcome such a situation. After they entered the true martial school and heard of Yi Zaiwen's glorious past, they treated it like a story. They didn't pay much attention to it. Even if there were any situations mentioned, they would only hear how Yi Shiwen was massacring others. They didn't know how much of danger involved within these stories. After entering the true martial school, they were led to the Tibetan Star Summit by Yi Shiwen. Their experience here was extremely smooth. They finally had the chance to witness how Yi Shiwen managed to force his way through dire situations. Moreover, he had even offended the legendary Transcendent Realm experts. How could they not be anxious? In fact, they held even less confidence than these true martial school disciples. The true martial school's higher-ups had witnessed Yi Zaiwen's growth and knew that Yi Shiwen knew some powerful lost techniques. However, they were different. They didn't get the chance to witness Yi Zaiwen's growth, and their impression towards him was still the same as the previous Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen killing a great sage was already a dreamlike achievement for them. Killing a Transcendent Realm expert was even more of a legend in their eyes. However, no matter what, Yi Shiwen and the other 4 experts were rushing outside of the true martial domain with lightning speed and fought towards the deep parts of the starry skies. Just like what Yi Shiwen had said, it was too constricting to be fighting within the true martial domain. If they weren't careful, they might destroy the ancestral peak. Although others wouldn't mind, people of the true martial school would mind. As such, he brought the fight over to the starry skies. The 4 experts surrounded him. Within them, only Wei Mingyang took action and came closer towards him. The other 3 didn't have any intentions of attacking him. The 4 of them besieging Yi Shiwen was already shameful enough. If it weren't for Yi Zaiwen's words that forced them to do so, they would never do such a thing. It wasn't because they were kind, nor was it for moral reasons. They merely felt contempt about it. Wouldn't it be too shameful for 4 of them to work together just for dealing with a mere great sage? The 4 of them were outstanding people within their sect. None of them would be able to shame themselves this way. No matter how much you struggle, it's futile. After all, you're going to die. You can't escape, said Wei Mingyang with a cold smile. An expression of ruthlessness appeared on his face. He deeply hated Yi Shiwen for daring to shame him. Yi Shiwen sucked in a cold breath. For Transcendent Realm experts, such a fanatical move. Yi Shiwen, have you gone mad? These are 4 Transcendent Realm experts. You wouldn't even be able to defeat any single one of them. What are you thinking of by attracting all 4 of them here? Yi Mo's bellow resounded within his mind. He didn't know what Yi Shiwen wanted to do. Even with the protection from the Tianyuan mirror that had ascended to a transcended tool, he merely could go against a Transcendent Realm expert. For example, he would be able to ignore the opponent's aura. However, this didn't imply that he could truly defeat one. And now, he had to face 4 of them. In his eyes, this was no different from seeking death. Even the Tianyuan mirror might be destroyed in such a situation. I'm aware. It's precisely because they're Transcendent Realm experts that I had to lure them here. Otherwise, it would be impossible to deal with it. You've seen their attitudes earlier. They wanted to force the true martial school into an awkward situation. It's nothing if the school loses face. Most importantly, we can't allow them to see how weak we are. Otherwise, the Overlord Alliance would come to attack the true martial school within a short time. Such a result is much more terrifying, said Yi Shiwen coldly. Naturally, he was unequivocal what 4 Transcendent Realm experts meant. However, in such a situation, he had no choices left. There wasn't any other way out. Humph. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. The aura on his body was continuously surging. He broke through the Great Sage Realm and ascended to the half-step Transcendent Realm. Half-step Transcendent Initial Realm. Half-step Transcendent Intermediate Realm. Half-step Transcendent Late Realm. Yi Zaiwen's aura soared till the half-step Transcendent Late Peak Realm. With only a tiny push, he would ascend to the Transcendent Realm. The only thing he lacked was Heaven's Retribution. Previously, Yi Shiwen had changed his position with the Star Beast avatar when he was flying through the cosmos, under the situation where no one knew about it. This was also why he dared to gamble. Even if he failed, it wouldn't be an absolute fail. He still had a chance. Although his own body would receive a considerable backlash, his life wouldn't be in danger. So you've been concealing your strength? So you're in the half-step transcendent realm. However, do you think that makes any difference? Such a laughable joke. Do you think that a half-step transcendent realm would be able to deal with us, experts in the transcendent realm? Wei Mingyang was shocked by Yi Zaiwen's increase in strength. He never expected Yi Shiwen to have raised his cultivation strength without him seeing through it. Naturally, he didn't know that Yi Zaiwen's original body only had the strength of a great sage, great perfection realm. This was his star beast avatar. Naturally, their cultivation was different. If you only hid such a tiny bit of strength, then today is the day you die. A cruel smile flashed across Wei Mingyang's face, as if he had seen something that sparked joy. Hurry up and deal with this pesky bug. I still want to assess the true martial school's schoolmaster and see whether he's that strong, said Mu Qingman in a slothful manner. Her tone was chilly. She didn't even care about Yi Zaiwen's death, and even Huang Wuji as well. Please read the original from www.steambunlightnovel.com. You may not know, but we have Patreon for this translation project. That means more chapters to read. Hop into https://www.patreon.com/translation for more info. Although she was ordered to challenge Huang Wuji by her master, she had the intention to fight against him as well. Although they were around the same age, Huang Wuji was already in control of a legacy. And yet, they were just a new powerhouse figure of their sect. The vast difference between them and Huang Wuji made them feel unresigned. On what basis can he become a schoolmaster? They were jealous of him even if he was the schoolmaster of a rural area. When they held the competitiveness in their hearts, they would naturally want to win against Huang Wuji to prove themselves to be stronger than Huang Wuji. Relax. It won't take long. It would just take a while, said Wei Mingyang as he moved towards Yi Shiwen. He lunged towards Yi Shiwen, and his towering body made it seem like his attack had enveloped the entire skies. A radiating saber light instantly flashed. It slew the heavens and earth, and even chaos itself was trembling. This was the 8 Stars School's lost technique. 8 Stars royalty-shattering saber. If it were fully released, it would be capable of slaying the heavens and earth. Yi Shiwen didn't dare to underestimate it. Wei Mingyang's attacks were too quick. In an instant, he had rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. His saber had already approached Yi Zaiwen's face, as if it was about to slash Yi Shiwen apart. Blood-colored radiance arose from Yi Zaiwen's body, as if it was a blood-dyed armor. He immediately clenched his hand into a fist. With a boom, it transformed into a massive star. He punched it against the saber attack. Boom! The long saber slashed the massive star, and a horrifying clashing sound resounded as if 2 powerful forces had clashed against each other. Within it, blood-colored power was splashing out, which made it terrifying. The long saber slashed through the massive star and landed on Yi Zaiwen's fist. However, his attack was blocked by the blood-colored energy. He wasn't able to kill Yi Shiwen. However, the enormous force's ripples passed through the blood-colored armor and affected Yi Zaiwen's body. Yi Shiwen was forced backward by 3 steps and finally managed to dissipate the enormous force. Yi Zaiwen's eyes glinted in excitement. In the previous duel, he had lost. His fist intent was slashed apart by Wei Mingyang's saber aura very thoroughly. If it wasn't for the Tianyuan mirror protecting him, he might have been sliced in half on the spot. The disparity in strength between him and a transcendent realm expert was huge. Even so, the enormous force had managed to reach his body. If it wasn't for the tyrant body being sturdy, he might be deeply wounded by such a force alone. It was conceivable when he had to step back 3 steps to dissipate the enormous force. Fortunately, Wei Mingyang's strength was miles apart from the emergent school leader. He wasn't comparable to the emergent school leader's terrifying strength in the slightest. Even when the emergent school leader was gravely wounded, the feeling he gave Yi Shiwen was much scarier than the aura Wei Mingyang emitted. With the combat experience, it was undoubtedly extremely beneficial to him. Although he was shocked, Wei Mingyang was in even more of a shock. He let out a what sound. Yi Shiwen was merely shocked by the transcendent realm expert's strength, which he was fighting against. However, Wei Mingyang was genuinely shocked. He didn't understand how Yi Shiwen didn't die and managed to block his strength. Could it be that he's able to fight against a transcendent realm expert? That's impossible. However, before he could think of anything else, he suddenly felt the world's pressure swiftly expanding fanatically. Within the vast starry skies, dusky clouds started gathering together. Is someone challenging a retribution? This thought instantly flashed across his mind. Chapter 788. Chapter 788. Killing techniques beneath the heaven's retribution. The mighty heaven's retribution instantly enveloped the sky. The horrifying might made the transcendent realm experts' faces pale. They had just experienced heaven's retribution. Naturally, they were aware that this heaven's retribution belonged to that of a transcendent realm. Everyone's faces became extremely pale. For Yi Shiwen, these heaven's retribution was totally capable of killing him when things got too dangerous. However, the opponent only had a 10% chance of surviving, especially when undergoing the transcendent realm's heaven's retribution. It was the most horrifying heaven's retribution they had ever witnessed. Out of 10 half-step transcendent late realm, 9 of them had perished by the transcendent realm heaven's retribution. The 10% chance of survival made their faces pale upon thinking about it. The terrifying heaven's retribution was the reason why the number of transcendent realm experts was so scarce. However, no matter what they were thinking about, heaven's retribution still descended. The rolling clouds were announcing the arrival of the majestic heaven's retribution. It was too late for them to leave now. They realized that heaven's retribution had already locked on them. Unless if heaven's retribution was over, they couldn't escape no matter where they went. Standing within the center of heaven's retribution, Yi Shiwen took a deep breath. This was the first time he was experiencing a transcendent realm's heaven's retribution. In fact, this was the first time he challenging heaven's retribution using the Star Beast avatar. Yi Shiwen wasn't aware of what kind of retribution would descend upon him. Yi Shiwen smiled as he looked at the 4 people's faces that were extremely pale. His smile was extremely bright. They were tricked into being forced to undergo heaven's retribution. He was confident that they wanted to scold him. Currently, the true martial school was experiencing an uproar. No one expected Yi Shiwen to use such a way to fight against his enemies. Isn't this a suicidal attack? I never expected Yi Shiwen to have reached the phase of passing the transcendent realm's heaven's retribution. If we let him undergo the retribution in a quiet place, our school might have an addition of another transcendent realm expert. And yet, he's going to undergo it during a battle. A transcendent realm's heaven's retribution is already scary enough. In such a situation, it only means death. Indeed, I never expected Yi Xiwen's talents to be so outstanding. He had just entered our school for 100 years and already managed to accomplish such achievements. He can be dubbed as the #1 prodigy of the school in the past tens of thousands of years. No, it's too much of a loss if he dies here. When the time calls for it, we have to protect him no matter what the situation was. Junior brother is too rash. Does he plan to perish together with them, using heaven's retribution? Said by Jian Song as he gritted his teeth, filled with hate. Of course, the hatred wasn't directed towards Yi Shiwen. It was for the extraterrestrial overlords. If junior brother experiences any casualties, I won't let them live a peaceful life. He remembered it deeply within his heart. His talents were considered decent. With enough time, he would be able to reach the transcendent realm. When the time comes, he would have the capability of taking revenge. I agree. Lu Yinlan by his side nodded coldly. Her heart was also boiling in anger. Only, she wasn't proficient in displaying her emotions. Currently, Yi Feng and Yi Ruxue were all panicking. Their spiritual senses were unable to reach such a remote area. They could only listen to the description of others. When they heard of the situation, their face became ashen, undergoing heaven's retribution while being in combat. Isn't that just seeking death? Undergoing heaven's retribution was always a dangerous matter. Preparations had to be complete to entice heaven's retribution. They weren't certain as to what would happen. Upon the stage, Huang Wuji's face was still expressionless. However, the flickering in his eyes displayed the mess of emotions he was experiencing within his heart. He knew that Yi Shiwen stood out purely for him. Otherwise, he didn't have to face such a risk. Now, Yi Shiwen only needed a little more effort to ascend to the transcendent realm. If today's matters didn't happen, he could wait for preparations to complete before undergoing heaven's retribution. However, from Huang Wuji's perspective, undergoing the retribution so rashly would undoubtedly cost his life. Yi Shiwen was sacrificing himself for his sake. That can't happen. When the critical time arrives, I can't ignore him even with my schoolmaster position. Contradictory to the true martial school's worrisome crowd, the extraterrestrial overlords were comparatively more relaxed. Naive. Does he think that he can launch an internecine attack on 4 transcendent realms with such a method? Truly naive. Indeed. What does he think transcendent realm experts are? How can such a method kill them? Shameless, truly shameless. How could he use such a method? However, he definitely would fail. Yi Shiwen laughed. Utilizing heaven's retribution to kill them? No. Yi Shiwen had never thought of using that method. In truth, it was impossible as well. Although heaven's retribution was horrifying, these transcendent realm experts weren't that easy to deal with. They would never be killed so easily. Of course, if they weren't in the transcendent realm, they would be deeply wounded or die by it even if their numbers increase. The danger lay within the cultivation gap was indisputable, after all. What Yi Shiwen planned on doing was to delay the opponent's actions with heaven's retribution. With enough time delayed, he would be able to enter the transcendent realm. With that, things would be different. The Star Beast avatar that contains the Star Beast bloodline would experience a burst in terrifying combat prowess. Currently, the foundations of the Star Beast avatar was extremely sturdy. The past few years were all used to ensure the stability of his foundations. Due to the Star Beast bloodline lineage, as long as he overcame the Transcendent Realm's heaven's retribution, his combat prowess would experience a surging increase. The power slumbering deep within his bloodline would also awaken very quickly. He didn't need to enhance his combat power like others slowly. This was his greatest advantage. Kill him, and the heaven's retribution would end, said Wei Mingyang with an angry bellow. He was currently outraged. He could feel how thick the clouds were getting in the sky. At such a moment, the other 3 Transcendent Realm experts couldn't remain calm any longer. If heaven's retribution were to befall, the 4 of them would be affected by it. They had to kill him before the heaven's retribution's power manifest at an extremely horrifying degree. The terrifying and boundless aura enveloped everything as if it wanted to drown Yi Shiwen. It was truly horrifying. Just as the opponent wanted to take action, numerous thunders struck from the sky. In an instant, the entire cosmos became a sea of lightning. At this moment, the horrifying aura of the heavens was in full display. Everything within the sea of lightning turned into nothingness and dispersed entirely within. Just like a downpour, it instantly came down and drowned everything. The lightning sea flooded everything. Even the surrounding meteorites had turned into fragments. Yi Shiwen felt the lightning turning into one huge dragon after another in an instant, and were all bombarding his body. With the Tianyuan mirror protecting him, these bolts of lightning were unable to get near him. Like how Yi Shiwen expected, the 4 Transcendent Realm experts withstood the lightning downpour and came to pursue him. They were enveloped in layers of qi and wanted to kill Yi Shiwen instantly. Whenever the lightning downpour befell upon them, it exhausted a large amount of their qi. They weren't like Yi Shiwen. They didn't have the dragon vein buried within the Tianyuan mirror that could be used at their disposal. Bang! Ran Qingtian bellowed and made a move first. The first move he made was the Heavenly Martial Heaven's Severing Palm. It was the top-notch lost technique of the Heavenly Martial sect. His hand almost grabbed the entire world into destruction. His hand came crashing downwards towards Yi Shiwen. Within the sea of lightning, everywhere was trembling. Even the insides of the sea of lightning were trembling. The tremble was so terrifying that it even shook the entire world. Yi Shiwen had a feeling that even the skies were going to be severed. He couldn't avoid nor retreat from it, and was forced to endure it with all his might. The Tianyuan mirror within his body was radiating with an even brilliant blood-colored radiance. It instantly formed a protective layer, just like a layer of armor. With his hands clenched into a fist, he went up against Ran Changshan's attack. Boom! Two shocking brilliance surged from within, followed by boundless energy waves. It swept through the area with an insurmountable force. Even the boundless lightning retribution sea was swept away by this terrifying force, and nothing remained. As the radiance dissipated, it was instantly destroyed by the lightning downpour. Yi Zaiwen's body flew from within. Such a horrifying trembling force caused the blood-colored protection on his body to form a few cracks. Ran Qingtian didn't hold back at all. His intention to kill Yi Shiwen in the first move was so blatant. Yi Shiwen wasn't able to withstand it. The strength of a transcendent realm expert was much more terrifying than he had imagined. However, before he could catch a breath, the 10 Extremities Sex Mu Qing Man arrived in front of him. She brought along a boundless and horrifying aura, which instantly bombarded Yi Shiwen. In such a situation, Yi Shiwen couldn't go against her attack forcefully. He immediately expanded his demon wings, and his speed increased by a significant caliber. He turned into a ray of golden light and disappeared within the lightning downpour. When he reappeared, he was already thousands of miles away. He immediately dodged away from Mu Qing Man's killing technique. Such a speed was considered to be heaven-defying. Seeing how Yi Shiwen managed to dodge their killing technique, the Transcendent Realm experts were shocked. They never expected Yi Zaiwen's speed to be so quick. Although none of them had explicitly cultivated techniques that increase speed, it wouldn't be a glaring shortcoming for a Transcendent Realm expert. Even if it was their shortcoming, it was sufficient in crushing experts below the Transcendent Realm. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.